The night Damien Voss destroyed his marriage on live television, he had no idea he was signing his own death warrant. Manhattan's most powerful tech billionaire stood before 300 guests and 20 cameras, his hand wrapped around a supermodel's waist, announcing the end of his decade-long marriage like it was a fucking stock report. What he didn't know: his invisible wife had spent 10 years building a trap so perfect, so devastating, that when she finally pulled the trigger, the entire empire would collapse on his head. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain started 3 hours before everything went to hell. Damien Voss stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of Blackstone Tower's presidential suite, watching water streak down the glass like the city was crying. He wasn't the sentimental type, never had been, but something about tonight felt wrong. A tightness in his chest he couldn't name. A voice in the back of his head whispering, "Turn around, walk away, this is a mistake." He ignored it. "You look nervous." Celeste Laurent appeared behind him, her reflection shimmering in the wet glass. 6 feet of Brazilian perfection wrapped in a dress that cost more than most people's cars. Her hand slid across his shoulder blade, nails painted the color of fresh blood. "You're not getting cold feet, are you?" "Never." He turned, pulling her close enough to smell the champagne on her breath. "Tonight changes everything. For both of us." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Never did with Celeste. That's what he liked about her. No pretense, no emotion, just ambition in a body that stopped traffic. "The press is already downstairs. Your team confirmed CNBC, Bloomberg, Forbes. This is going to be everywhere by midnight." "Good." Damien straightened his tie, checking his reflection in the mirror across the room. 42 years old, and he looked 35. Money could buy a lot of things, including the illusion of youth. Let them watch. Let the whole fucking world watch. What he didn't say: let her watch. Elena, his wife, ex-wife. Whatever she was now, the paperwork was filed, the lawyers had been circling for months, but the ink wasn't dry yet. Not technically. She'd been so quiet about the whole thing. Too quiet. No screaming, no tears, no dramatic confrontations, just that look she'd given him the night he told her about Celeste. Like she was disappointed but not surprised. Like she'd been expecting it. That should have been his first warning. Damien shook his head, pushing the thought away. Elena was soft. Always had been. A small-town girl who'd gotten lucky when he married her fresh out of grad school, before Voss Dynamics became what it was. She'd been pretty back then, beautiful even, in that understated way that didn't translate well to camera. No edge, no fire. Just this gentle, patient presence that had felt comforting 10 years ago and suffocating now. She'd be fine. He'd given her a generous settlement, more than generous. Enough money to disappear quietly and start over somewhere far from Manhattan, far from the life he was building without her. 5 minutes, Mr. Voss?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Damien took a breath, felt the adrenaline kick in, that familiar rush of standing at the edge of something massive. Tonight wasn't just about announcing the merger with Laurent Capital, though that alone was worth billions. Tonight was about showing the world who Damien Voss really was. Not the guy who'd clawed his way up from Brooklyn with student loans and desperation. Not the husband of some nobody who'd helped him file incorporation papers in a coffee shop a decade ago. The king. The fucking king of Manhattan tech. "Let's go," he said. The ballroom was already packed when they stepped off the elevator. Manhattan's elite crammed shoulder to shoulder beneath crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. Venture capitalists in $1,000 suits. Tech founders who'd sold companies for 9 figures. Fashion designers. Museum curators. That one governor everyone pretended to respect. The air smelled like money and desperation. Everyone trying to prove they belonged, that they'd earned their place in this room. Damien had earned his place, built it from nothing, or so he told himself. "Damien!" Marcus Chen pushed through the crowd, drink in hand, grinning like they were old friends instead of competitors who'd spent the last 3 years trying to destroy each other. "Hell of a night for an announcement. Merger's really happening? Signed this afternoon." Damien shook his hand, squeezing just hard enough to make a point. Laurent Capital and Voss Dynamics. Biggest tech consulting partnership in North American history. And the other news? Marcus's eyes flicked to Celeste, then back. The personal announcement? You'll hear it with everyone else. Marcus laughed, but there was something sharp underneath. I always wondered about Elena, where she went. She used to be at every event, every conference. Then one day, poof, like she never existed. She preferred privacy. Right. Marcus took a long drink. Privacy. That what we're calling it? Damien felt his jaw tighten. This was the problem with people like Marcus. They'd known him too long, remembered too much. Remembered when Damien was nobody, when Voss Dynamics was just an idea scribbled on napkins in Elena's cramped apartment while she worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. But that was ancient history. Excuse me, Damien said. I need to prepare. He moved through the crowd with Celeste on his arm, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, feeling the weight of 300 sets of eyes tracking his every move. This was what power felt like. Not money. Any idiot could stumble into money. Power was making people watch you, making them care what you did next, making them reshape their entire lives around the gravity of your decisions. The stage waited in the far end of the ballroom, massive screens flanking both sides showing the Voss Dynamics logo in sharp blue light. His PR team had choreographed everything down to the second, the lights, the music, the exact moment he'd take Celeste's hand and announce their engagement 30 seconds after revealing the merger. 1-2 punch. Business and pleasure. The old Damien disappearing, the new Damien rising. He climbed the steps, took his position behind the podium, felt the lights hit his face, hot and blinding. Somewhere in the back of his mind, that voice whispered again, something's wrong. But it was too late now. The cameras were rolling. The room had gone silent. Every eye in Manhattan was pointed at him like a loaded gun. Good evening. His voice echoed through the sound system, smooth and confident. Thank you all for being here tonight. I know you came for champagne and gossip, so I'll keep this brief. Scattered laughter. 10 years ago, I started Voss Dynamics with nothing but an idea and a laptop. No investors, no connections, just pure determination to build something that mattered. He paused, letting the lie settle. It was a lie he'd told so many times, it almost felt true. Tonight, I'm proud to announce the next evolution of that dream. Voss Dynamics and Laurent Capital are merging to create the largest tech consulting empire in North America. Applause. Cameras flashing. But that's not the only announcement. Damien reached for Celeste's hand, pulling her close. I'm also here to share something personal. As many of you know, my marriage to Elena Vale ended several months ago. It was amicable, mutual. We simply grew apart. Another lie, but a useful one. Tonight, I'm honored to announce my engagement to Celeste Laurent, partner in business, partner in life. The applause was louder this time. Forced, maybe. Half these people probably thought he was an asshole, but loud. Celeste kissed him for the cameras, her lips cold and perfect. And that's when the screens went black. All of them, simultaneously. The applause died. Confused murmuring rippled through the crowd. Damien turned, squinting at the dark screens, feeling that wrongness in his chest suddenly explode into full-blown panic. Then the screens flickered back to life, but not with his logo. With words. White letters on black background, huge and impossible to ignore. Who really built the empire? What the fuck? Damien spun toward his tech team in the wings, but they looked just as confused as everyone else. Cut the feed! Cut it now! But the screens didn't cut. They changed. Documents appeared. Bank records. Transfer receipts. All dated from 10 years ago, showing deposits flowing from Elena Vale's personal accounts into Voss Dynamics LLC before the company even officially existed. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Money Damien had never mentioned in any interview, any investor pitch, any origin story. Because he'd pretended it didn't exist. Jesus Christ, someone whispered behind him. The documents kept coming. Strategy memos in Elena's handwriting. Business plans she'd drafted while Damien was still bartending in Brooklyn. Emails where she'd coached him through every pitch, every negotiation, every decision that built the company's foundation. Then came the recordings. Audio files playing through the ballroom speakers. Damien's voice, crystal clear, bragging to investors about how he'd sidelined his wife, how she was dead weight, how he'd built everything alone. Another recording of him laughing with Marcus Chen about Elena's pathetic attempt to claim credit for the company's early success. The room was dead silent now. Everyone staring, everyone knowing. Damien's hands were shaking, his throat closed up. He tried to speak, to explain, to spin, to do something, but no words came out. The screens changed again, this time showing text messages, his text messages. To Celeste, from 8 months ago, 6 months before he filed for divorce. Messages that left no doubt. The affair had been going on for nearly a year. Messages where he called Elena boring, invisible, a mistake he'd been trapped in since he was too young and stupid to know better. Celeste had gone pale beside him. She pulled her hand away. "I didn't," Damien started, but she was already walking off the stage. The crowd erupted, not in applause, in chaos. People shouting questions, cameras swiveling, phones out, recording everything. The carefully constructed image Damien had spent 10 years building was disintegrating in real time, and he couldn't stop it, couldn't even slow it down. Then the screens went black again. One final message appeared. Ask Nikolai Orlov who really owns Voss Dynamics. And that's when Damien's heart stopped, because he knew that name. Everyone in this room knew that name. Nikolai Orlov, the ghost who ran half of Manhattan's underground financial networks, the man you didn't fuck with unless you had a death wish. Rumors said he had connections to Russian oligarchs, Chinese tech giants, Middle Eastern oil money. Rumors said he could destroy a company with a single phone call. Rumors said he didn't make mistakes. A figure moved through the crowd, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of calm that made everyone step aside without being asked. Nikolai Orlov looked exactly like the rumors described. Cold gray eyes, sharp suit, face carved from granite. He climbed the stage steps slowly, deliberately, like he had all the time in the world. Damien couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "Gentlemen, ladies." Nikolai's voice was quiet, but somehow filled the entire ballroom, accent just thick enough to remind everyone he'd come from somewhere much more dangerous than Manhattan. "I apologize for the interruption, but I think it's time we cleared up some confusion about who actually owns this company." He pulled a folder from inside his jacket, placed it on the podium. Voss Dynamics was never Damien's company. It was always Elena's. Someone laughed, nervous, disbelieving. Nikolai didn't smile. Through a network of trusts and shell corporations established 10 years ago, long before Damien had any real power, Elena Vale structured the company so that she retained 70% controlling interest. Damien was given 30% and full operational control as CEO. He could run the company, make decisions, play the role of founder. Nikolai opened the folder, held up documents for the cameras. But he never owned it. Elena did. Elena does. Every investor agreement, every contract, every major decision required her silent approval. She was the foundation. Damien was the face. The room exploded again, voices overlapping. Someone shouted about fraud, someone else about lawsuits. Board members were already pulling out phones, calling lawyers, calling each other. Damien felt like he was drowning. "You're lying," he managed. This is fucking bullshit. I built this company. Me. I made every decision, every deal. You made the decisions Elena allowed you to make." Nikolai's eyes were empty. No anger. No satisfaction. Just cold fact. "She protected you, guided you, cleaned up your mistakes, and when you betrayed her," he gestured at the screens, at the evidence still glowing there, "she decided it was time to take back what was always hers." "Where is she?" Damien's voice cracked. "Where the fuck is Elena?" "Right here." The voice came from the back of the ballroom, quiet, steady, familiar. The crowd parted like a curtain, and Elena Vale walked through. She looked different. That was the first thing Damien noticed. Not the soft, invisible woman who'd faded into corners at parties. Not the girl who'd worn bargain dresses and apologized for taking up space. This Elena wore power like a second skin. Black suit, hair pulled back severe, heels that clicked against marble with the rhythm of inevitability. No jewelry except her wedding ring, still on her finger, somehow worse than if she'd thrown it away. She walked past 300 people and not one of them said a word. Damien watched her climb the stage steps, watched her stand beside Nikolai. watched her look at him, really look at him, for the first time in years. "Hello, Damien." His mouth was dry. "Elena, I don't understand." "I know." She almost smiled. "You never did." "This is insane. You can't destroy everything we built because you're angry about the divorce." "I'm not angry." And that was somehow worse than if she'd been screaming. "I'm done." She turned to address the room, the cameras, the world watching through live streams and phone screens. "My name is Elena Vale. 10 years ago, I founded Voss Dynamics with my personal savings and a vision for what tech consulting could become. I structured the company, secured the initial funding, and built the framework that allowed it to grow. I did this because I believed in the work, and because I loved my husband." Her voice never wavered. But somewhere along the way, Damien decided my contributions didn't matter, that I was invisible, replaceable. So I let him believe that. I stepped back, stayed quiet, and I watched. Someone coughed. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I watched him take credit for my work, watched him rewrite our history, watched him betray our marriage while pretending to be a devoted husband. Elena's eyes found Celeste in the crowd. "I watched all of it, and I documented everything." She nodded at Nikolai. "As of tonight, Damien Voss is removed as CEO of Voss Dynamics. The board has already voted, unanimously. I'm assuming full control. The company will be rebranded as Vale Global within the month." "You can't," Damien started. "I can." Elena finally looked at him again. "I own it. I always have. You were just borrowing my empire, Damien, and now I'm taking it back." The room erupted again, but Damien barely heard it. His knees felt weak, his vision blurred at the edges. 10 years, a decade of his life, his identity, his entire sense of self wrapped up in being Damien Voss, CEO, founder, king of Manhattan tech. All of it a lie, all of it hers. "The merger with Laurent Capital is canceled," Elena continued. "Miss Laurent's firm will receive compensation for breach of contract, as will any investors affected by tonight's restructuring." Celeste was already gone. Damien saw her disappear through the exit, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling her lawyers, probably pretending she'd never known him. "Security will escort you from the building," Elena said quietly, almost gently. "Your personal belongings will be packed and sent to whatever address you provide." "Elena," his voice broke. "Please, we can talk about this. We can, We're done talking, Damien. We've been done for a long time." She turned away. "I just needed you to know before the world did." Nikolai stepped forward, not threatening, not touching him, just standing there like a wall between Damien and any chance of fixing this. "Come on." Nikolai's voice was flat. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Security appeared from nowhere. 2 men in dark suits who gripped Damien's arms with professional courtesy that somehow felt worse than violence. They guided him toward the exit while 300 people watched in silence. Damien looked back once, saw Elena standing at the podium, calm and terrible and completely in control. The woman he'd forgotten existed. The woman who'd been running everything the whole time. And as the ballroom doors closed behind him, shutting him out of the only life he'd ever known, Damien Voss finally understood the truth. He'd never been the king. He'd been the puppet, and Elena had just cut the strings. Outside, the rain had stopped. Manhattan glittered beneath a clearing sky, indifferent to Damien's collapse. The security guards deposited him on the sidewalk and disappeared back inside without a word. Damien stood there, soaked from the residual moisture in the air, watching people stream out of Blackstone Tower. Investors, board members, friends who wouldn't meet his eyes. His phone vibrated, text messages flooding in, news alerts, headlines already spreading across every business network in the world. Tech CEO exposed. Wife-owned company all along. Damien Voss removed from owned company in explosive reveal who is Elena Vale, the invisible billionaire who fooled Manhattan. His hand shook as he tried to call his lawyer. Voicemail. He tried his CFO. Voicemail. He tried Marcus Chen. The asshole had seemed sympathetic earlier, but Marcus declined the call after one ring. Nobody wanted to be associated with a fraud. Nobody wanted to drown with a sinking ship. Damien scrolled through his contacts. Hundreds of names, business partners, investors, people he'd met at conferences, closed deals with, celebrated successes with over expensive whiskey. Not one of them felt safe to call. The last name in his recent calls was Elena, from 3 months ago. The night he told her about Celeste, the night he'd asked for a divorce. She'd been so quiet on the phone, just listening while he explained how they'd grown apart, how he needed someone who understood his ambitions, how she'd always be taken care of financially. She'd said 4 words, "Okay, thank you, Damien," and hung up. He thought she was broken, thought she was accepting defeat. Jesus Christ. She'd been saying goodbye to a dead man. A black car pulled up to the curb, tinted windows, engine purring like a predator. The back door opened and Nikolai Orlov stepped out, pristine despite the chaos inside. "Get in." Damien's throat closed. "If you're going to kill me, just do it here." Nikolai actually laughed, cold, brief. "I'm not going to kill you. Elena doesn't want you dead. She wants you humiliated. There's a difference." "Then what do you want?" "To explain something you're too stupid to understand on your own." Nikolai gestured at the open car door. "Get in or don't. I don't care. But this is the only warning you'll get." Damien climbed in because he had no other options. The interior was leather and silence. Nikolai sat across from him, pouring vodka from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. He handed one to Damien. "Drink!" Damien drank. The vodka burned, but he barely felt it. "Elena and I met 7 years ago," Nikolai said. "She came to me for help protecting her assets. Even then, she knew you were a liability. Knew you'd eventually try to cut her out completely." He swirled his glass. "I helped her build the legal structure that owns Voss Dynamics. Shell companies, trusts, offshore accounts. All perfectly legal. All completely invisible to you." "Why?" Damien's voice was hoarse. "Why would she do that if she loved me?" "Because loving someone doesn't mean trusting them." Nikolai's eyes were gray ice. "She loved you. She also knew exactly who you were. Ambitious, selfish, too hungry for the spotlight to ever share it willingly." Damien wanted to argue, couldn't. "For years she protected you," Nikolai continued. "Covered your mistakes, fixed your deals. Made sure you looked like the genius everyone thought you were. She did this because she hoped you'd eventually see her, really see her." "I did see her." "You saw furniture." Nikolai's voice went flat. "You saw someone useful, someone safe, never someone equal." The car pulled away from Blackstone Tower, rolling through Manhattan streets that suddenly felt foreign. "The affair with Celeste was just confirmation," Nikolai said. "Proof that you'd never value Elena the way she deserved. So she made a decision. To destroy me. To free herself." Nikolai finished his vodka. "You're not destroyed, Damien. You still have money, connections, skills. You can rebuild if you're smart. But stay away from Elena. Don't call her. Don't contact her. Don't even think about revenge." Nikolai leaned forward. "Because if you do, if you cause her even a moment of trouble, I'll make sure you disappear. Not killed, not arrested, just erased. Gone from every system, every network, every life you've ever touched." The car stopped outside a hotel Damien didn't recognize. "This is yours for the week," Nikolai said. "Your belongings will arrive tomorrow. After that, you're on your own." Damien stumbled out onto the sidewalk. The car was already pulling away before he could respond. He stood there for a long time, watching traffic, watching people who didn't recognize him walk past like he was invisible, like he'd been invisible all along. His phone buzzed again. Another headline: Elena Val announces engagement to Nikolai Orlov. Damien's stomach dropped. The photo below showed Elena and Nikolai leaving Blackstone Tower together, her hand in his, both of them looking like they owned the fucking world. Because they did. Damien scrolled further, found video footage from the ballroom after he'd been removed. Elena giving interviews, calm, collected, explaining how she'd built the company from nothing while her husband took credit, how she'd finally decided to step forward and claim what was rightfully hers. The comments were brutal. Queen behavior. "This is what happens when you underestimate your wife. Damien Voss is an idiot and he deserves everything he got." Thousands of comments, millions of views, The story spreading like wildfire across every platform, every network, every conversation in every city where people gave a damn about power and money and the spectacular fall of men who thought they were untouchable. Damien wanted to throw his phone into traffic. Instead, he went inside the hotel. The room was nice, not luxury, he'd been spoiled by luxury, but clean, functional. The kind of place where people started over after their lives fell apart. He sat on the edge of the bed, stared at his hands, tried to remember the last time he'd actually looked at Elena. Really looked. Not just glanced at her across a room or nodded while she spoke. Actually seen her. He couldn't remember. Couldn't remember the last time they'd had a real conversation. The last time he'd asked how she was feeling. The last time he treated her like someone who mattered instead of someone who was just there, part of the landscape of his success. She'd been invisible because he'd refused to see her. And now everyone could see her except him. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. But what did he have to lose? Damien Voss? The voice was professional. Lawyer, probably. This is Catherine Reyes from Sterling & Associates. We represent Vale Global. I'm calling to inform you that divorce proceedings will be finalized within 30 days. Per the prenuptial agreement you signed, you're entitled to compensation equal to your initial investment in the company plus $3 million. $3 million? Damien laughed, bitter. The company's worth billions. The company is worth billions because of Elena's work. You received fair compensation for your contributions as CEO over the past 10 years in the form of salary and bonuses. The $3 million represents your original capital investment adjusted for inflation. I want to talk to Elena. Ms. Vale has made it clear she has nothing further to discuss with you. I deserve— Mr. Voss. Catherine's voice went cold. You deserve exactly what the legal documents say you deserve. Nothing more. Sign the papers or contest them in court and lose everything. Your choice. The line went dead. Damien sat in silence. The rain had started again outside. Softer this time. Almost gentle. He thought about calling someone. Anyone. But everyone who mattered had already abandoned him. The investors. The board. Celeste? God, Celeste had probably already scrubbed every photo of them together from her social media. She was smart enough to know when a brand was toxic, and he was toxic now. The fraud, the liar, the man who'd stolen his wife's empire and pretended it was his. Except that wasn't even true. He hadn't stolen anything. She'd given it to him, built it beneath him like a foundation, and then let him stand on top, let him wave to the crowds and take the applause while she stayed in the shadows. Why? Because she loved him. That's what Nikolai had said. She'd loved him enough to make him look powerful even when he wasn't. Loved him enough to protect him from his own stupidity. Loved him enough to let him have everything he wanted until he proved he didn't deserve any of it. Damien's chest hurt. Not from anger anymore. From something worse. Understanding. He'd had everything. A brilliant wife, a successful company, a partnership built on trust and shared dreams. And he'd thrown it away because it wasn't enough. Because he wanted the spotlight all to himself. Because he needed everyone to believe he was special, exceptional, entirely self-made. Because he was too weak to share credit. Too insecure to admit he'd needed help. Too blind to see that the person standing beside him in the shadows was worth more than every person who'd applauded him in the light. His phone buzzed one last time. A message from Elena. He opened it with shaking hands. I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do. But it won't be with me. Goodbye, Damien. No anger, no bitterness, just finality. And beneath the message, a link to a video. Damien clicked it. The video was old, grainy, shot on someone's phone 10 years ago in Elena's cramped apartment. They were younger, broke, exhausted from working multiple jobs while trying to build something neither of them really understood yet. In the video, Elena was laughing at something Damien had said. He couldn't remember what, but he remembered that laugh. Remembered the way she'd looked at him back then. Like he was capable of anything, like they were capable of anything together. Remembered when he used to look at her the same way. The video ended. Damien sat in the dark hotel room, staring at the frozen frame of Elena's face from a decade ago, and felt something break inside his chest that he knew would never heal. She'd loved him. She'd built him an empire, and he'd repaid her by making her invisible. Outside, Manhattan continued its endless rhythm, Taxis honking, people shouting, the city moving forward without him, without pause, without mercy. Damien Voss had spent 10 years trying to become untouchable. He'd succeeded. Now nobody wanted to touch him at all. The morning came like a punishment. Damien woke on top of the hotel comforter, still wearing yesterday's suit, his mouth tasting like copper and regret. Sunlight cut through the blinds in sharp lines that felt deliberately cruel. His phone was dead on the nightstand. He didn't remember falling asleep. Didn't remember much after watching that video of Elena laughing in her old apartment, back when they were broke and stupid and believed in each other. Back when he wasn't a national punchline. He plugged in his phone and immediately regretted it. 3,000 notifications, emails, messages, voicemails, news alerts screaming his name from every major outlet in the country. CNN had run a segment called The Invisible Wife, How Elena Vale Built an Empire While Her Husband Took Credit. Forbes published The Greatest Con in Tech History and The Woman Who Ended It. Twitter was a bloodbath. His Wikipedia page had already been updated. Former CEO, known primarily for fraud and marital infidelity. Someone had created a TikTok soundbite of his voice from the leaked recordings saying Elena's dead weight, and it had 17 million views. 17 million people listening to him destroy his wife while dance remixes played in the background. He wanted to throw up. Instead, he ordered room service, coffee, and nothing else because his stomach couldn't handle food, and forced himself to shower. The water was scalding. He stood under it until his skin turned red, trying to wash away the feeling of being dissected by the entire internet. It didn't work. When he emerged, a bellhop was wheeling in cardboard boxes, his belongings from the penthouse, from the office, everything he owned reduced to 6 boxes and 2 garment bags. "Where do you want these, sir?" "Anywhere." Damien's voice came out flat. "Doesn't matter." The bellhop hesitated. I saw the news. That's rough, man. Get out." "Right, sorry." The kid backed toward the door. "For what it's worth, my mom always said you seemed like a dick." The door closed before Damien could respond. He stood in the middle of the room, staring at the boxes like they contained evidence from a crime scene, which, in a way, they did. 10 years of his life packed up by strangers and delivered to a hotel room that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner. His laptop sat on top of one box. He opened it, immediately wished he hadn't. His company email had been deactivated. His corporate accounts, locked. His access to Voss Dynamics' internal systems, revoked. He tried logging into the bank account he'd used for a decade and got an error message. Tried his investment portfolio. Nothing. Every digital fingerprint of his former life had been scrubbed clean. Elena's lawyers worked fast. He pulled up his personal banking app. The balance made him laugh out loud, bitter and sharp. $47,000. That's what remained of the millions he'd made over the years. The rest had been in stock options that technically belonged to Elena, in accounts tied to the company, in assets he'd stupidly registered under Voss Dynamics LLC instead of his own name. Because he'd never imagined he'd need to protect himself from his own wife. His phone rang. Unknown number again. He almost didn't answer. "What? Mr. Voss?" A woman's voice, not Catherine the lawyer, someone else. "This is Amanda Reeves from the New York Times. I'm writing a piece about the Voss Dynamics situation, and I'd love to get your perspective." He hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. "Damien Voss, this is Jake Chen from Bloomberg. Quick question about the timeline of..." He hung up again. 3 more calls came in rapid succession. CNN, Wall Street Journal, some podcasts he'd never heard of. They all wanted the same thing, his side of the story, his explanation, his blood in the water so they could watch him bleed in high definition. Damien turned off his phone, sat in silence, tried to think. The problem was he had no moves left, no board to negotiate with, no investors to charm, no wife to clean up his mistakes. For the first time in a decade, Damien Voss was completely alone with the consequences of his own decisions, and he had no idea what to do. A knock at the door made him jump. He opened it, expecting another reporter. Instead, Marcus Chen stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. "What do you want?" Damien asked. "To talk. 5 minutes." Marcus glanced down the hallway. "Can I come in?" Damien stepped aside. Marcus entered, surveying the boxes with barely concealed satisfaction. "Hell of a fall," Marcus said. "Did you come here to gloat?" "Little bit." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, uninvited. "But mostly I came to offer advice." "I don't need your advice. You need somebody's advice. Look at you." Marcus gestured at Damien's wrinkled clothes, his unshaven face. "You look like a guy who just found out his entire life was a lie. Which, to be fair, is accurate." Damien's jaw clenched. "Say what you came to say or get out." "Fine." Marcus leaned forward. "Elena's winning right now. The press loves her. Investors love her. She's the underdog who outsmarted the arrogant husband. Very cinematic. Very satisfying for everyone watching." "Your point?" "My point is you can still flip this. Not completely. You're fucked. Let's be clear. But you can rehabilitate your image. Do the apology tour. Cry on camera. Talk about how success corrupted you, how you lost sight of what mattered. People eat that shit up." Damien stared at him. "You want me to humiliate myself on television. I want you to survive." Marcus stood. "Because right now you're radioactive. Nobody will touch you. But if you play the redemption arc correctly, if you admit you were wrong, if you seem genuinely broken and remorseful, eventually people will forgive you. Americans love a comeback story." "Elena won't forgive me." "Elena doesn't matter anymore." Marcus's voice went cold. "She's moved on. You should too." "With Nikolai Orlov," Damien tasted bile. "Did you know about that?" "Everyone knew about that." Marcus moved toward the door. "They've been together for years. Quiet, careful, but not invisible. You just weren't paying attention." The words hit like a punch to the gut. "Years?" "At least 3. Maybe longer." Marcus paused in the doorway. "She didn't leave you for him, Damien. She just stopped pretending she didn't have other options." He left. Damien stood frozen in the middle of the room, trying to process what Marcus had just confirmed. Elena and Nikolai. For years. While Damien was fucking Celeste and bragging about his empire and treating his wife like she was invisible, Elena had been planning this the whole time, building her exit strategy, documenting his betrayals, falling in love with someone else while Damien fell in love with himself. Jesus Christ. He grabbed his laptop and started searching, found photos he'd somehow never seen before. Elena at a charity gala 2 years ago. Nikolai standing just behind her. Elena at a tech conference. Nikolai in the background, watching. Elena leaving a restaurant in Soho, Nikolai holding the door. How had he missed it? Because he wasn't looking. Because he'd assumed Elena was too weak, too devoted, too pathetic to ever consider leaving him. Because he'd been so convinced of his own importance that he'd never imagined his wife might have her own life, her own plans, her own fucking agency. The laptop screen blurred. Damien realized he was crying, not from sadness, from rage. From the crushing weight of understanding that he'd been played, expertly, patiently, completely, by the one person he'd underestimated most. He slammed the laptop shut, stood, paced the room like a caged animal. He needed to do something. Couldn't just sit here drowning in self-pity. Couldn't let Elena win without at least trying to fight back. But fight back how? She owned the company, had the board's support, had Nikolai's protection, had the media eating out of her hand. What did Damien have? Nothing. Nothing except anger and desperation and the kind of reckless energy that made men do stupid things. He grabbed his jacket, his wallet, left the hotel room without a plan. Manhattan in daylight felt different than it had the night before. Harsher, more indifferent. Damien walked through Midtown with his hood up, avoiding eye contact, convinced everyone recognized him. A guy selling hot dogs did a double take. 2 women walking past whispered and pulled out their phones. He ducked into a coffee shop, ordered an espresso he didn't drink, sat in the corner booth and tried to think clearly through the static in his head. Option 1, disappear. Take his 47 grand and move somewhere nobody knew his name. Portland, Austin, fuck it, Bangkok. Start over completely. New identity, new life. But that felt like surrender. Option 2, fight Elena in court. Contest the divorce settlement. Claim he'd been coerced or manipulated or... No. That would just make him look weaker, more pathetic. And Elena's lawyers would destroy him. Option 3, go to the press. Tell his side of the story. Explained that yes, he'd made mistakes, but Elena had been manipulating him for years. That she'd deliberately structured everything to maintain control while making him think he was in charge. But who would believe him? She had documentation, proof, a paper trail that told a very clear story. Devoted wife builds empire, arrogant husband takes credit, karma delivers justice. His story was just excuses. Damien Voss? He looked up. A man stood beside his booth, 50s, expensive suit, face that belonged on a corporate board or a yacht somewhere warm. Who's asking? Damien said. Richard Castellano. I run Castellano Ventures. We met briefly at TechCrunch 3 years ago. He extended his hand. Damien didn't shake it. What do you want? To buy you a drink and have a conversation. Richard slid into the booth uninvited. I've been following your situation with interest. Everyone's been following my situation. It's a national fucking circus. True. Richard signaled the barista for 2 coffees. But most people are watching for entertainment. I'm watching because I see an opportunity. That got Damien's attention. What kind of opportunity? You're toxic right now, unemployable in any legitimate capacity, but you're also extremely talented. You built Voss Dynamics into a billion-dollar company, regardless of whose money funded it initially. That takes skill. Your point? My point is, Elena Vale isn't the only person in Manhattan with money and ambition. Richard leaned back. She's riding high now. The press loves her. But empires don't last forever, especially empires built on revenge. You want me to help you compete with Vale Global. I want you to help me destroy it. Richard's smile was thin. Elena thinks she's untouchable, that having Nikolai Orlov in her corner makes her invincible. But Orlov has enemies, powerful ones. And Vale Global, despite its success, has weaknesses. Structural vulnerabilities that someone with inside knowledge could exploit. Damien's pulse quickened. You're talking about corporate sabotage. I'm talking about competition, aggressive competition. Richard's coffee arrived. He sipped it slowly. Elena took everything from you. Your company, your reputation, your wife. Don't you want to take something back? Yes. God, yes. But why would you trust me? Damien asked. I'm a fraud, remember? A liar who stole credit from his wife. You're also desperate, and desperate men are useful. Richard set down his cup. I'm not asking you to run a company. I'm asking you to consult. Share what you know about Vale Global's operations, their clients, their strategies. Help me build a competitor that can steal their market share. That's corporate espionage. Only if we get caught. Richard stood. Think about it. You have my card. He didn't leave a card, just walked out, leaving Damien alone with a choice that tasted like poison. He could do it. Could feed Richard information about Elena's company. Could help build something specifically designed to undermine everything she'd worked for. Could hurt her the way she'd hurt him. But that would make him exactly what everyone already thought he was. Vindictive, petty, incapable of accepting responsibility for his own failures. It would prove Elena right. Prove he'd never deserved her in the first place. Damien left the coffee shop without finishing his drink. Walked aimlessly through Manhattan for hours, avoiding anywhere familiar, anywhere someone might recognize him and ask questions he couldn't answer. Eventually, he found himself in Brooklyn, his old neighborhood. The apartment building where he'd lived before Elena, before Voss Dynamics, back when he was bartending and dreaming about startups and convinced he was destined for greatness. The building looked smaller than he remembered, dirtier. A crackhead slept in the doorway. Graffiti covered the mailboxes. This was where he'd started, where he'd met Elena. She'd been subletting a studio down the hall, working as a financial analyst while finishing her MBA. They'd met in the building's shitty laundry room at 2 a.m. because neither of them could sleep. Started talking about business, about ideas, about the future. She'd believed in him before anyone else did, before he believed in himself. And he'd repaid her by erasing her from his success story. Damien's phone, still off, suddenly felt heavy in his pocket. He turned it on, waited for the inevitable flood of notifications. But before they arrived, he opened his contacts, scrolled to Elena's name, stared at it for a long time. He could call her, try to apologize, try to explain that he understood now, that he was sorry, that he'd been blind and arrogant, and no. She'd made it clear she was done. That goodbye text wasn't an invitation for dialogue, it was a door closing, permanently. Another notification appeared. Email from Catherine the lawyer. Subject line: Final divorce settlement. Signature required. He opened it. The document was clinical, precise. $3 million in exchange for his 30% stake in the company and any future claims against Elena's assets. He'd keep his personal belongings, his car, and whatever remained in his individual accounts. Everything else belonged to her. There was a section at the bottom requesting his signature. And a note from Catherine: You have 72 hours to sign, or we proceed to litigation. I strongly advise signing. Damien read through the whole document twice, looking for loopholes, finding none. Elena's lawyers had anticipated every possible angle of attack. The prenup was ironclad. The corporate structure was legally airtight. She'd spent years building a fortress around her assets, while Damien thought he was the one in control. He scrolled back to the signature line, stared at it. If he signed, it was over. Officially, permanently. He'd have $3 million and nothing else. No company, no claim to the empire he'd believed was his, no connection to Elena except the shared memory of a marriage that had ended in spectacular flames. If he didn't sign, Catherine would bury him in litigation he couldn't afford to fight. There was no good option, just surrender or annihilation. His finger hovered over the screen. Then someone grabbed his arm, hard. Damien spun. Found himself face to face with two men in dark suits, the same men who'd escorted him out of Blackstone Tower. Mr. Orlov wants to see you, one of them said. I'm not interested in... That wasn't a request. They guided him, not violently, but with enough pressure to make resistance pointless, toward a black SUV idling at the curb. The back door opened. Nikolai Orlov sat inside, reading something on his phone. Get in, he said without looking up. Damien climbed in because refusing seemed like a good way to end up in a dumpster. The SUV pulled into traffic. Tinted windows turned the city into shadows. I hear Richard Castellano approached you, Nikolai said. Still not looking at him, Damien's stomach dropped. How? I know everything that happens in this city, especially everything that concerns Elena. Now Nikolai looked up. Those cold gray eyes pinned Damien like a bug to cardboard. Castellano wants you to sabotage Vale Global, provide inside information, help him build a competitor. I didn't agree to anything. I know, but you thought about it. Nikolai set down his phone. You thought about hurting Elena because you're angry and humiliated, and you want someone to suffer the way you're suffering. She destroyed my life. No. Nikolai's voice went flat. You destroyed your life. Elena just stopped protecting you from the consequences. The SUV turned onto a bridge. Manhattan disappeared behind them. Where are we going? Damien asked. Somewhere we can talk without interruption. They drove for 30 minutes in silence. Eventually, the SUV stopped outside a warehouse in Queens. Industrial area, empty streets, the kind of place where bad things happened and nobody heard screaming. Damien's pulse hammered. If you're going to kill me, I told you before. Elena doesn't want you dead. Nikolai opened his door. But she also doesn't want you causing problems, so we're going to establish some boundaries. They entered the warehouse. It was empty except for a single chair in the center of the concrete floor and a folding table with a laptop. Sit, Nikolai said. Damien sat. Nikolai opened the laptop, turned it to face Damien. The screen showed financial records, bank accounts in Damien's name he didn't recognize, transactions dating back years, payments to offshore accounts, wire transfers that looked like money laundering. What is this? Damien's voice cracked. Insurance. Nikolai leaned against the table. If you accept Castellano's offer, if you try to sabotage Elena in any way, these records will be sent to the FBI, the SEC, and every major news outlet in the country. You'll be investigated for fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. I never made those transactions. I don't even know what these accounts are. I know. Nikolai almost smiled. I created them. Very carefully, very convincingly. They'll stand up to initial scrutiny long enough to destroy whatever remains of your reputation and tie you up in legal battles for the next decade. Damien felt cold sweat running down his spine. You're framing me. I'm protecting Elena. There's a difference. Nikolai closed the laptop. Sign the divorce papers. Take your $3 million. disappear from her life. That's the deal. And if I don't, then these records go public. You'll spend the rest of your life fighting criminal charges you can't afford to defend against. You'll die broke and alone in a cell somewhere forgettable. Damien's hands were shaking. Elena knows about this? Elena knows I protect her interests. The methods are my concern. She wouldn't want this. She's not— You don't know what Elena wants anymore. Nikolai's voice went cold. You never did. That was always your problem. He pulled out a phone, pulled up a video, held it where Damien could see. The video showed Elena in what looked like a conference room. Recent, maybe yesterday. She was laughing at something someone off camera said. She looked lighter than Damien had seen her in years. Happier. Free. Nikolai appeared in the frame, kissed her forehead. She leaned into him like it was the most natural thing in the world, like she belonged there. She's moved on, Nikolai said quietly. You should do the same. He put the phone away. You have 72 hours, he continued. Sign the papers. Leave Manhattan. Start over somewhere else. That's your path forward, the only path. And if I go to the police, tell them you threatened me? With what evidence? Nikolai gestured around the empty warehouse. No cameras here. No recording devices. Just your word against mine. And given your current reputation, whose word do you think carries more weight? He had a point. Damien had nothing. No leverage, no allies, no options except the ones Nikolai was offering. Surrender or destruction. Why are you doing this? Damien asked. If Elena's already won, why do you need to threaten me? Because men like you don't accept defeat gracefully. Nikolai moved toward the door. Because you're proud and stupid and capable of making desperate decisions that hurt people I care about. So I'm removing your ability to make those decisions. By blackmailing me. By giving you a clear choice. Nikolai opened the warehouse door. Sunlight cut through the darkness. $3 million and your freedom, or prison and obscurity. Choose wisely. The SUV ride back to Manhattan was silent. They dropped Damien outside his hotel. He stood on the sidewalk, watching the vehicle disappear into traffic, trying to process what had just happened. Nikolai had him trapped, completely. If Damien signed the papers, he lost everything he'd spent a decade building. If he didn't sign, Nikolai would destroy him using fabricated evidence nobody would question. There was no winning move, just different flavors of losing. Damien went back to his hotel room, sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the divorce papers still open on his laptop screen. His phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. Richard Castellano can't protect you. Sign the papers. Last warning. Damien threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered. He sat in silence for a long time, breathing hard, trying to think through the rage and fear and crushing sense of helplessness. Finally, he picked up the laptop, scrolled to the signature line, and stopped. Because signing meant admitting defeat, meant accepting that Elena had won completely, meant walking away from the only life he'd ever known. But not signing meant Nikolai would bury him. And Elena wouldn't even know, wouldn't care. She was already gone, already building a new empire with a man who actually saw her, who protected her, who loved her in ways Damien never had. She'd moved on. Why couldn't he? His hand hovered over the signature line. Outside, sirens wailed. The city moved forward without him. And Damien Voss, former CEO, former husband, former king of Manhattan Tech, finally understood the truth Nikolai had been trying to tell him. He'd never been powerful. He'd been allowed to feel powerful. There was a difference. And now the permission had been revoked. He signed the papers, closed the laptop, sat in the dark hotel room, and felt the last piece of his old life dissolve like salt in water. It was done. Elena had won, and Damien had nothing left except the choice of where to go next and who to become in whatever remained of his life. He didn't have an answer, not yet, but as he sat there in the silence, with $3 million and no empire, no wife, no identity except the cautionary tale he'd become, Damien Voss made one final decision. He would rebuild. Not for revenge, not to prove Elena wrong, but because the alternative, disappearing into obscurity and bitterness, felt like dying while still breathing, and he wasn't ready to die yet, even if he deserved to. The next morning, he packed his boxes, checked out of the hotel, Bought a one-way ticket to Portland because it was as far from Manhattan as he could imagine without leaving the country. At the airport, his new phone buzzed. Email confirmation. Divorce finalized. $3 million deposited into his account. Another email from Catherine. Good luck, Mr. Voss. For what it's worth, everyone makes mistakes. Not everyone gets a second chance to learn from them. He boarded the plane, found his seat by the window, watched Manhattan disappear beneath the clouds as the plane climbed towards something that might eventually feel like a future. But even as the city vanished, even as miles opened between him and the ruins of his old life, Damien couldn't shake one final thought. Elena was still there, still building, still winning. And somewhere in the back of his mind, quiet but persistent, was the question that would haunt him for years. Had she ever really loved him? Or had he always been just a tool in a plan he was too blind to see? He'd never know. And that uncertainty, that not knowing, hurt worse than any revenge Nikolai could have engineered. The plane leveled off. Damien closed his eyes. And for the first time in his adult life, he had absolutely no idea what came next. Portland smelled like rain and coffee and failure. Damien rented a studio apartment in the Pearl District with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked nothing important. Just other buildings, other lives, other people who hadn't spectacularly destroyed everything they'd ever built. The furniture came from IKEA. The dishes were mismatched. The whole place felt temporary, like a holding cell where he was waiting for someone to tell him what happened next. Nobody did. Days blurred together. He woke up late, ordered delivery, scrolled through news about Elena. And there was always news about Elena. Vale Global was expanding into Europe. Elena had been featured on the cover of Fortune with the headline, "The Queen Who Built Her Kingdom in Silence." Nikolai appeared in the photos sometimes, standing just behind her shoulder, protective and possessive. They looked perfect together. Damien tried not to look, failed constantly. 3 weeks into his new life, his money started running out faster than expected. $3 million sounded like a lot until you factored in rent, lawyers still sending bills for consultations he couldn't afford, and the fact that he had zero income and zero prospects. Nobody in tech would touch him. His resume was radioactive. Even recruiters stopped returning his calls after they Googled his name. He tried freelancing, posted on LinkedIn offering consulting services. Got one response. Fuck off, fraud. So he stopped trying, started drinking instead. Not catastrophically. Not yet. Just enough to make the afternoons feel less sharp, less accusatory. Enough to sleep through the nights without dreaming about Elena's face when she'd looked at him on that stage, calm and final, and completely done. 1 month in, he got a call from his mother. He almost didn't answer. Damien? Her voice sounded older than he remembered. Are you alive? Yeah, Mom. I'm alive. I saw the news. Long pause. All of it. I figured. You want to tell me your side? There is no side. Elena was right about everything. His mother was quiet for a moment, then, you always were an idiot about that girl. She was too good for you, and you treated her like furniture. Thanks, Mom. Really needed to hear that. I'm not finished. Her voice went sharp. But she also should have left you years ago instead of playing games, building secret empires, collecting evidence like she was preparing for war. That's not love, Damien. That's revenge. She had a right to be angry. Maybe. But good people don't spend years planning to destroy someone. They just leave. His mother sighed. You're both damaged. You just damaged each other in different ways. I have to go. Damien, he hung up, sat staring at his phone for a long time, trying to decide if his mother was right. Decided it didn't matter. Elena had won. The method didn't change the outcome. 2 months in, Richard Castellano called. How's Portland? Richard asked. Too casual, too friendly. How did you get this number? I get every number I want, Richard laughed. You settling in okay? Finding work? What do you want? Same thing I wanted before. Your help destroying Elena Vale's empire. Pause. I'm guessing your bank account's looking pretty thin by now. $3 million doesn't last long when you're unemployed. Damien's jaw clenched. I told you I'm not interested. You told me that when you still had options. Now you're broke and desperate in Portland, which, no offense, is where careers go to die. Richard's voice dropped. I'm offering you $2 million. Cash. Offshore account. Completely untraceable. For what? Client lists, strategic plans, internal communications, anything that gives me leverage against Veil Global. Richard paused. And I want you to testify that Elena knew about certain financial irregularities during your time at Voss Dynamics. Nothing criminal, just enough to damage her credibility. That's perjury. That's survival. Richard's tone hardened. You think Elena wouldn't throw you under the bus if it benefited her? She already did, Damien. She destroyed you on national television, took everything you built and erased you from the story. Because I deserved it. Maybe, but you don't deserve to rot in Portland while she lives like a queen in Manhattan. Pause. $2 million. Think about it. Richard hung up before Damien could respond. He sat on his couch, staring at the ceiling, doing the math. $2 million plus what remained of his settlement, maybe 2.2 total. That was enough to start over properly. Move somewhere warm, buy a small business, rebuild a life that didn't involve checking his bank balance every morning with mounting panic. All he had to do was betray Elena one more time. Except it wouldn't be betrayal, would it? She'd already severed every connection between them. They were strangers now. What did he owe her? Nothing. He owed her nothing. But the thought of helping Richard, of actively working to destroy what Elena had built, made his stomach turn. Not because he loved her. He didn't think he loved her anymore. But because it would prove she'd been right to cut him loose. Would prove he was exactly the vindictive, petty man everyone thought he was. Damien opened his laptop, searched for Elena's name, found a recent interview with Bloomberg. She looked tired but powerful, hair pulled back, no makeup, answering questions about Veil Global's expansion with the kind of precision that made reporters lean forward. The interviewer asked, "Do you ever think about your ex-husband?" Elena paused. "I think about the lessons he taught me, about what happens when you trust the wrong person with power." "Do you regret the marriage?" "I regret not leaving sooner." No hesitation. "But I don't regret what I learned." The interviewer smiled. "And Nikolai Orlov? How long have you two been together?" "That's private. There are rumors you've been together for years, that the relationship overlapped with your marriage." "My relationship with Nikolai began after my marriage ended emotionally. The timeline doesn't matter." Elena looked directly at the camera. "What matters is that I'm with someone who sees me as an equal, who respects what I've built, who doesn't need to diminish me to feel powerful." The implication was clear. Damien wasn't that person, had never been that person. He closed the laptop, felt something crack inside his chest that he'd been trying to ignore for months. She was right. About everything. He had diminished her, erased her, treated her contributions like they were less important than his charisma, his vision, his fucking ego. And now she was thriving without him, while he drowned in a Portland studio apartment, contemplating whether to sell her out for $2 million. His phone buzzed. Text from Richard. "Offer expires in 48 hours. After that, I find someone else." Damien stared at the message. 48 hours to decide who he wanted to be. The vindictive ex-husband who burned everything out of spite. Or something else. Something better. He didn't know if he was capable of better, but he knew accepting Richard's offer would guarantee he never found out. He typed back. "Not interested. Lose my number." Blocked Richard's contact. Threw his phone on the couch. Felt something that might have been relief or might have been despair. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. 3 months in, his bank account hit 5 figures. Damien started applying for normal jobs. Marketing positions at small agencies. Communications roles at nonprofits. Anything that would pay rent and didn't require explaining why the former CEO of a billion-dollar company was applying for $40,000 a year positions. He got 3 interviews. All 3 ended the same way. Initial interest followed by awkward silences after they Googled his name. "We'll be in touch," they'd say. They never were. One hiring manager was honest. "Look, man, you're clearly talented, but our clients would freak out if they knew we hired you. The liability alone." Damien walked out before she finished. He tried teaching, posted on LinkedIn offering to mentor young entrepreneurs, got some interest. Mostly people who wanted to hear horror stories about his downfall, not actual business advice. One kid asked, "What's it like being a national punchline?" Damien deleted his LinkedIn account. 4 months in, he was sitting in a coffee shop, different from the one where he'd met Richard, but similar enough to feel haunted, when someone sat down across from him. A woman, 30s, sharp eyes, expensive suit that didn't match Portland's casual aesthetic. "Damien Voss?" she asked. "Depends who's asking." "Jennifer Morris. I'm a lawyer representing Nikolai Orlov." She slid a folder across the table. "He asked me to deliver this personally." Damien's stomach dropped. "I signed the divorce papers. I haven't contacted Elena. I turned down Richard Castellano. What more does he want?" "Open it." He opened the folder. Inside were financial documents, bank statements, wire transfers, all in his name, all showing transactions he'd never authorized. The same fabricated evidence Nikolai had threatened him with months ago. "What is this?" Damien's voice was barely audible. "Insurance policy." Jennifer's expression was neutral. "Mr. Orlov wanted you to understand that his reach extends beyond Manhattan, that even in Portland, even living quietly, you're still under observation." "I haven't done anything." "We know. This is a reminder to keep it that way." She stood. "Richard Castellano contacted you. You declined his offer. That was the right choice." "How do you know about that?" Jennifer smiled, didn't answer. "Stay quiet. Stay irrelevant. And these documents never see daylight. Understood?" She left before he could respond. Damien sat frozen, staring at the evidence of crimes he hadn't committed, but that would destroy him if anyone believed he had. Nikolai was still watching, still controlling, still reminding Damien that he wasn't free, just on a longer leash. The realization settled over him like a weight. He'd left Manhattan, signed the papers, turned down revenge, done everything right. And he was still trapped, still being monitored, still living under the threat of Nikolai's manufactured evidence. How long would it last? How many years would pass before Nikolai decided Damien was no longer worth watching? Before the leash finally broke? 5 years? 10? Never? Damien left the coffee shop, walked through Portland's rain-soaked streets until his clothes were drenched and his hands were numb. He needed to disappear. Not just physically, completely. Become someone Nikolai wouldn't bother tracking, someone so insignificant, so removed from Elena's world, that the cost of surveillance outweighed any potential threat. But how? He couldn't change his name legally. That would flag in systems Nikolai probably monitored. Couldn't leave the country. His passport was tracked. Couldn't do anything dramatic without risking exactly the kind of attention he was trying to avoid. He was stuck. Trapped in a life he hated, monitored by a man who'd never forgive him, paying for sins he'd committed against a woman who'd already moved on. 5 months in, Damien hit bottom. Not dramatically. No suicide attempt. No drunken breakdown. Just a quiet Tuesday afternoon when he realized he'd spent the entire day staring at a wall, unable to summon the energy to shower or eat or pretend he had a reason to keep breathing. He was $38,000 away from broke. No job prospects, no relationships, no purpose except continuing to exist in case something eventually changed. That night, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Damien Voss?" A man's voice. Unfamiliar. "Who is this?" "My name is Thomas Rivera. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm working on a project about corporate power dynamics, and I'd like to interview you." Not interested. "I'm not trying to sensationalize what happened. I want to understand it. The real story, not the headlines." Thomas paused. "I'll pay you. $20,000 for a full interview." $20,000. That was 3 more months of rent, 3 more months of survival. "What do you want to know?" Damien asked. "Everything. What really happened with Elena, how the power structure worked, whether you knew she controlled the company." Pause. "And what it's like living with the consequences." Damien closed his eyes. "You want me to confess on camera. I want you to tell the truth, whatever that is." "The truth makes me look terrible." "I know, but silence makes you look worse." Thomas's voice softened. "Right now, you're just the villain in someone else's story. This is a chance to be a person, flawed, complicated, human." Damien thought about it, about spending the rest of his life as a cautionary tale, a punchline, a name people mentioned when they wanted to illustrate hubris and downfall. Or he could tell his side, Not to justify what he'd done, there was no justifying it, but to acknowledge it, own it, stop running from the narrative and just let it exist. One condition, Damien said. You don't contact Elena. Don't ask her to participate. This is my story, not hers. Deal. They scheduled the interview for the following week. Damien spent the next 7 days trying to figure out what he wanted to say, how to explain the inexplicable, that he'd loved his wife and still managed to erase her, that he'd built an empire on her foundation and convinced himself he'd done it alone, that he'd been so desperate to be seen as special that he'd become blind to the person actually making him successful. How did you explain that without sounding like you were making excuses? You didn't. You just said it and let people judge. The interview took place in Thomas's rented studio space. Bare white walls, professional camera setup, 2 chairs facing each other. Thomas was younger than Damien expected, maybe 30. Earnest in that way documentary filmmakers often were, like they believed exposing truth could actually change the world. Ready? Thomas asked. No. Yeah. The camera started recording. Tell me about the beginning, Thomas said. When did you meet Elena? And Damien talked. For 3 hours, he talked. About meeting Elena in that shitty Brooklyn laundry room. About how she'd believed in his ideas before he even believed in them himself. About how she'd funded the company's early days with money from jobs she worked while he was still bartending and dreaming. About how somewhere along the way, he'd started believing his own mythology, that he was the visionary, the founder, the reason Voss Dynamics succeeded. About how he'd minimized Elena's contributions until they became invisible, how he'd rewritten their shared history into a solo origin story, how he'd treated her like an assistant instead of a partner. About Celeste. About the affair. About announcing his engagement on the same stage where he'd just publicly ended his marriage. Like Elena's feelings were so inconsequential they didn't even warrant privacy. Did you know Elena controlled the company? Thomas asked. No, I thought I did. I thought I owned it, Damien's voice cracked. I thought I was the empire. Turns out I was just the front man for someone smarter than me. Are you angry at her? Damien considered the question. Really considered it. No, he said finally. I'm angry at myself for not seeing her, for not appreciating what I had until it was gone, for being so fucking desperate to be seen as special that I couldn't handle sharing credit with the person who actually made me special. Do you still love her? That question landed like a punch. Did he? I don't know, Damien admitted. I think I love the version of her I remember from 10 years ago. The girl in the laundry room who laughed at my stupid jokes and believed I could change the world. He paused. But that girl doesn't exist anymore. Elena grew up, got strong, learned not to need me. And the woman she became, his throat closed. I don't know her. I never did. If you could talk to her now, what would you say? Damien looked directly at the camera. I'm sorry for all of it, for taking credit for your work, for making you invisible, for treating you like you were replaceable when you were the foundation everything else was built on. His hands were shaking. You deserved better than me. You always did, and I'm glad you finally figured that out. Thomas turned off the camera. That was good, he said quietly. Honest. Damien felt hollowed out. When does it air? 6 months. Maybe 8. I need to edit, get clearances, find distribution. Thomas packed up his equipment. Your check will be mailed this week. Thanks. Thomas paused at the door. For what it's worth, I think you might actually be capable of becoming a better person, if you work at it. You one of those optimist types? I'm a realist. Most people don't change, but some do. Usually after they've lost everything and have no choice. Thomas smiled. You've lost everything. Question is whether you'll use it as an excuse to stay broken or a reason to rebuild differently. He left. Damien sat alone in the empty studio, Thomas's words echoing in his head. Rebuild differently. Could he? Did he even know how? 6 months in, the documentary aired. It wasn't huge. Premiered at a film festival, got picked up by a streaming platform nobody under 30 had heard of, generated a few think pieces about corporate culture and gender dynamics. But people watched it, and for the first time since the scandal broke, the narrative shifted slightly. Not completely. Damien was still the villain, But now he was a human villain, someone who'd made terrible choices and was living with the consequences. Someone who admitted his failures without trying to justify them. Someone who seemed genuinely destroyed by what he'd done. The response was mixed. Half the comments called him a manipulative asshole trying to rehabilitate his image. The other half said he seemed genuinely remorseful and deserved a second chance. Elena didn't comment publicly, but 2 days after the documentary dropped, Damien got an email. From her. Subject line, blank. Body, I watched it. Thank you for not dragging me into your redemption arc. I hope you find whatever you're looking for, truly, but find it away from me. That was it. No anger, no forgiveness, just a final boundary. And Damien realized that's what hurt most. Not that she hated him, but that she didn't feel anything at all. He'd become irrelevant to her emotional landscape. A closed chapter. A story she'd stopped telling. 7 months in, something unexpected happened. A small marketing agency in Portland, one he'd applied to months ago and never heard back from, called him in for another interview. We saw the documentary, the owner said. Her name was Sarah. Mid-40s, kind eyes. You were honest. That counts for something. I'm still the guy who screwed over his wife. You're also the guy who built a billion-dollar company and knows things we could learn from. Sarah leaned back. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for someone who can teach our junior team how to pitch clients, close deals, think strategically. And you're not worried about the optics. Our clients are local businesses. They don't care about Manhattan tech drama. She smiled. We're offering $45,000 a year. It's not CEO money, but it's honest work. Damien felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Hope, maybe? Or just relief that someone was willing to take a chance. When do I start? Monday. He took the job. It was humbling. Teaching 20-somethings about brand strategy. Running team meetings instead of board meetings. Making $45,000 instead of millions. But it was real. Honest. His. 8 months in, Damien got another call. This time from Catherine the lawyer. Mr. Voss, I have news. Nikolai Orlov's legal team contacted us. They're withdrawing their surveillance. Damien's heart stopped. What? Effective immediately, they're no longer monitoring your activities. The fabricated evidence has been destroyed. You're... Catherine paused. You're free. Why? They didn't say. But if I had to guess, Elena decided you're no longer worth the effort of watching. Catherine's voice softened. You rebuilt quietly. Didn't cause problems. Proved you weren't a threat. She moved on. So did they. The call ended. Damien sat in his apartment. He'd moved to a slightly nicer one-bedroom after getting the marketing job, trying to process what freedom actually meant. No more surveillance, no more threats, no more Nikolai's shadow hanging over every decision. Just life. Normal, unremarkable life. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like confirmation that Elena had stopped thinking about him entirely, and that hurt worse than any revenge could have. 9 months in, Thomas called again. The documentary's getting a second wave of attention, he said. Some influencer made a TikTok about it, and now everyone's watching. Views are up 300%. Great, Damien said flatly. There's more. I'm getting interview requests. People want to do follow-ups. Where is Damien Voss now pieces? Thomas paused. I wanted to warn you before it starts. I'm not doing more interviews. I figured. But brace yourself. This might get loud again. It did. Within a week, his phone was flooded with messages from journalists, podcasters, YouTubers who wanted to dissect his downfall with fresh eyes. Someone started a Reddit thread. Was Damien Voss actually the villain or just a guy who got outplayed? The debate raged for days. Some defended him, said Elena's revenge was calculated and cruel, that spending years planning someone's public destruction wasn't love, it was psychopathy. Others doubled down, said Damien got exactly what he deserved, that Elena's response was proportional to his betrayal, that men like him needed to be made examples of. Damien stopped reading after the first 100 comments, but one message stood out. An email from Marcus Chen. Subject: We should talk. Body: I know we're not friends, but I owe you honesty. Elena's not the saint everyone thinks she is. Call me. Damien stared at the email for a long time, then called. Marcus, what do you want? To tell you something you deserve to know. Marcus's voice was tight. About Elena, about Nikolai, about the real reason she destroyed you. She destroyed me because I was a shitty husband. That's part of it, but there's more. Pause. Meet me in Seattle. Tomorrow. I'll explain everything. Why should I trust you? Because I'm the only person willing to tell you the truth. Everyone else is hiding. Marcus's voice dropped. Elena wasn't building an empire to protect herself, Damien. She was building it for Nikolai. She's been working with him since before you even got married. The whole thing, your entire marriage, was a setup. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. You're lying. I have proof. Documents, communications, evidence that Elena and Nikolai planned this from the beginning. Marcus exhaled. She never loved you. You were just a useful frontman for an operation much bigger than Voss Dynamics, and when you stopped being useful, they cut you loose. Damien's hands were shaking. If this is some kind of... It's not. I'm trying to help you. Because what they did to you... Marcus's voice cracked. They're doing it to other people. Building empires on lies, and someone needs to stop them. The call ended. Damien sat frozen, Marcus's words echoing in his head. It couldn't be true. Could it? Elena had seemed genuinely hurt when he'd betrayed her. The documents proving her contributions were real. The foundation she'd built was legitimate. Unless all of it was theater. A performance designed to make the world believe she was the victim while she executed a plan years in the making. But why? What would Nikolai gain from destroying Damien specifically? Unless Damien had never been the target at all. Unless he'd just been collateral damage in something much larger. His phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Flight leaves at 6 a.m. I'll send you the ticket. Come alone. Damien should have ignored it. Should have blocked Marcus and moved on with his quiet Portland life. But if there was even a chance Marcus was telling the truth, if Elena had manipulated him from the beginning, if their entire marriage had been a lie designed to serve Nikolai's agenda, then everything Damien had spent the last 9 months accepting and grieving and learning from was built on a foundation even more corrupt than his own worst actions. And he needed to know, needed to see the proof, needed to understand whether he'd been defeated by karma or destroyed by something much more calculated. He booked the flight, packed a bag. And as he locked his apartment door at 4 a.m, heading toward whatever truth Marcus was offering, Damien Voss made one final realization. He thought he was free. Thought surveillance ending meant the story was over. But freedom was an illusion. Elena and Nikolai's reach extended further than he'd imagined. And whatever Marcus was about to show him would either confirm that Damien's downfall was justified, or prove that he'd been the pawn in a game he never knew existed. Either way, the truth was waiting, and Damien was finally desperate enough, broken enough, reckless enough to go looking for it. The Seattle flight landed at 8:47 in the morning under a sky the color of concrete. Damien moved through the terminal like a ghost, hood up, eyes down, trying to become invisible in a crowd that wouldn't recognize him anyway. His phone buzzed 3 times during the descent, all messages from Marcus with variations of the same instruction. Come alone, tell no one, trust me. Trust. That word tasted like poison now. Outside baggage claim, a black sedan idled at the curb. The window rolled down and Marcus leaned out, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky. Get in. Damien climbed into the passenger seat. The car smelled like leather and expensive cologne and something else. Fear, maybe. Desperation. Marcus looked different than he had 9 months ago. Thinner, older, like he'd been living on coffee and paranoia. You look like shit, Damien said. So do you. Marcus pulled into traffic without checking mirrors. We need to move fast. If Nikolai finds out I contacted you, then what? He kills us both? Worse. He makes us disappear. Marcus's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. You think that fabricated evidence was his only insurance policy? He has a network, Damien. People everywhere. Government, law enforcement, media. You cross him and you don't just get destroyed, you get erased. Then why are you crossing him? Because someone has to. Marcus took a sharp turn into an underground parking garage. And because what Elena and Nikolai did to you, they're doing it to others. building empires on people's backs and then discarding them when they're no longer useful. The garage was empty, echo of tires on concrete, fluorescent lights flickering overhead like dying stars. Marcus parked in the farthest corner, killed the engine, and pulled out a manila envelope. "Everything's in here," he said. "Bank records, communications, flight manifests, contracts dating back 12 years. 12 years. 2 years before Damien even met Elena. What am I looking at?" Damien opened the envelope. His hands were shaking. Proof that Elena Vale wasn't some innocent grad student when you met her. She was already working for Nikolai. Marcus pulled out the first document, a wire transfer receipt. "This is from 13 years ago. $50,000 from an offshore account registered to one of Nikolai's shell companies. Deposited into Elena's personal account 2 months before she moved to Brooklyn." Damien's throat closed. "That doesn't prove anything. Could be legitimate business. Keep reading." The next document was an email, dated 11 years ago, from Elena to an address that resolved to Nikolai's private server. "Met the target tonight. Damien Voss. He's exactly what we discussed. Ambitious, insecure, desperate to prove himself. Easy to manipulate. We'll proceed with Phase 1 as planned." Phase 1. Target. The word swam in front of Damien's eyes. "No." His voice came out strangled. "This is fake. You doctored these." "I wish I had." Marcus pulled out more pages. "There's a dozen emails like this. Elena reporting to Nikolai about your relationship, your progress building Voss dynamics, your emotional state. She was feeding him intelligence the entire time you were married." Damien's chest hurt. His vision blurred at the edges. "Why? What did Nikolai want from me? You were the front." Marcus flipped to another document, a contract. "Voss Dynamics was never supposed to be your company or even Elena's. It was a vehicle. Nikolai needed a clean tech consulting firm to funnel money through his network. Oligarchs, crime syndicates, foreign governments. He couldn't do it himself because he was too visible. So he used Elena to build the infrastructure and you to be the public face." "That's insane." "Is it?" Marcus's eyes were cold. "Think about it. How did Voss Dynamics land clients so quickly? How did you get meetings with CEOs who shouldn't have given a shit about some nobody from Brooklyn? Nikolai was opening doors, making introductions, using his network to build your reputation while you thought it was your charm and vision." Damien felt sick. "Elena knew?" "Elena designed it." Marcus showed him another email. This one from Elena to Nikolai 3 years into the marriage. "Dia's becoming too confident. May need to remind him who actually controls the operation. Suggest leveraging the Celeste angle. He's already showing interest. If he takes the bait, we can accelerate the timeline." The Celeste angle. Damien's mind reeled. "She wanted me to have the affair? She engineered it. Celeste Laurent wasn't some random supermodel you happened to meet. She's one of Nikolai's assets. Has been for years. They sent her to seduce you so Elena would have justification for the public takedown." Marcus leaned back. "You were never in control, Damien. Every decision you thought was yours. Cheating, going public with Celeste, signing the merger, all of it was scripted." The documents felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds in Damien's hands. His entire life, his entire identity, reduced to a performance in someone else's play. "Why?" he whispered. "If they already controlled the company, why destroy me publicly? Because you stopped being useful. Vale Global was ready to rebrand, expand internationally, and having you attached was liability. So they wrote you out." Marcus's voice went flat. "The public humiliation? The documentary rehabilitation arc? Even your redemption story was probably calculated. Keep you docile, keep you from asking questions." Damien wanted to argue, wanted to call Marcus paranoid, but the documents were right there. Emails, bank transfers, evidence that Elena had been playing a role from the moment they met in that laundry room. The girl who'd believed in him, who'd funded his dreams, who'd built the foundation of their empire. None of it was real. "I need to confront her," Damien said. "That's suicide. Nikolai will—" "I don't care," Damien's voice cracked. "I need to hear her say it. Need to look her in the face and hear her admit she lied about everything." Marcus grabbed his arm. "If you go to Manhattan, you won't make it out alive. Nikolai doesn't take chances with people who know too much." "Then what do you suggest? I just accept this and move on?" "I suggest we go to the FBI." Marcus pulled out a thumb drive. "I've copied everything. Bank records proving Voss Dynamics was used for money laundering, communications showing Elena and Nikolai's conspiracy, testimony from other victims, people they've destroyed using the same playbook. Other victims? 3 that I know of: tech founders, venture capitalists, politicians. Nikolai identifies targets, Elena gets close, they build something together, and when the target outlives their usefulness, Marcus made a cutting gesture. Gone. Reputation destroyed. Sometimes worse. Damien felt cold. How did you find all this? I was almost a victim. Marcus's jaw clenched. 2 years ago, Nikolai approached me about a partnership. Same pattern. Beautiful woman, easy money, promises of expanding my company. I got suspicious and hired a forensic accountant. Found the connections. Started digging. And they let you walk away? I'm too public. Destroying me would raise questions, so they backed off. Marcus met Damien's eyes. But you? You're already ruined, already discredited. If you die in some accident or disappear, who would question it? Everyone already thinks you're unstable. The words settled like stones in Damien's stomach. He was expendable, had always been expendable. The FBI, Damien said slowly. You really think they'd listen? I think they've been watching Nikolai for years and can't touch him because he's too careful. But if we give them Elena, if we prove she's been actively participating in money laundering and fraud, that's their way in. Marcus started the car. We go together, today, right now. We walk into the Seattle field office and hand them everything. Damien looked at the documents in his lap, at the evidence that his entire adult life had been a lie, that the woman he'd loved, or thought he'd loved, had never been real. Every memory was contaminated now. Every moment of tenderness, every laugh, every quiet morning drinking coffee while they planned their future together. All of it scripted, all of it theater. Okay, he said finally. Let's do it. Marcus pulled out of the parking garage. They drove in silence through Seattle's gray morning, heading toward the FBI field office downtown. Damien's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Turn around, now. His blood froze. Marcus? I see it. Marcus's voice was tight. He'd gotten the same message. Another text. FBI won't help you. They're already compromised. Turn around or die. Fuck this. Marcus accelerated. They're bluffing, trying to scare us. What if they're not? Then we're dead anyway. Might as well go down fighting. They were 6 blocks from the FBI building when the black SUV appeared behind them. Tinted windows. No plates. Following close enough to make the threat clear. Marcus swerved into the next lane. The SUV matched their movement. Call 911, Marcus said. Damien pulled out his phone. Before he could dial, a text appeared from the same unknown number. This time it was a photo. Marcus's wife, his 2 daughters, standing in their kitchen. A man in black visible in the background, face obscured. Your family is beautiful, Marcus. Would be a shame if something happened to them. Marcus went white. The car swerved. No, 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 no. They're threatening your family. I know. Marcus's voice cracked. He pulled over, hands shaking so badly he could barely put the car in park. I thought I was careful. Another text. Return the documents. Walk away. Your families live. Simple choice. Damien's phone buzzed with a photo of his mother's house in Brooklyn. Same man in black standing across the street. His mother. They were threatening his mother. Jesus Christ, Damien whispered. Marcus was crying now. Ugly, desperate sobs. I can't risk my girls. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Marcus looked at him with hollow eyes. We have to give them back the documents. And then what? They kill us anyway? Maybe. Probably. Marcus wiped his face. But at least our families... His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. Marcus Chen. Nikolai's voice, calm, almost friendly. You've had an interesting morning. Don't hurt my family, please. I'll give you everything. I know you will. Pause. Here's what happens next. You and Damien drive to the address I'm sending you. You bring the documents and the thumb drive. You come alone. No police, no FBI, no witnesses. And then you let us go? Nikolai laughed. Cold. No. But I let your families live, that's the deal. The line went dead. An address appeared via text. Industrial area south of Seattle. The kind of place where bodies disappeared into Puget Sound and nobody asked questions. Marcus looked at Damien. I have to go. For my daughters. I know. You don't have to come. You could run. To where? Damien's voice was flat. He has my mother. He has leverage on everyone I've ever known. Running just means they die. Marcus started the car, drove toward the address with the mechanical precision of a man already dead inside. They didn't talk. What was there to say? 30 minutes later, they pulled up to a warehouse that looked abandoned. Broken windows, rusted corrugated metal, no other cars visible. This is it, Marcus said. Yeah. They got out. The air smelled like salt water and motor oil. Damien carried the manila envelope. Marcus had the thumb drive in his pocket. The warehouse door opened before they reached it. Nikolai stood in the doorway, alone, no guards visible. Just him in an expensive suit that looked obscene in this setting. Gentlemen, he stepped aside. Come in. They entered. The warehouse was mostly empty except for a folding table in the center with a laptop and 2 chairs. Overhead lights cast sharp shadows that made everything look like a crime scene. The documents, Nikolai said. Marcus handed over the thumb drive. Damien placed the envelope on the table. Nikolai didn't check them, just nodded. Thank you for making this easy. Our families, Marcus said. You promised. Your families are fine. The photos were taken hours ago. My people are already gone. Nikolai sat on the edge of the table. I don't kill families, Marcus. That's crude. I just needed you motivated enough to cooperate. And us? Damien asked. What happens to us? That depends. Nikolai opened the laptop, pulled up a video feed showing Elena in what looked like a Manhattan office. She was on a phone call, laughing at something, unaware she was being recorded. How much do you want to hurt her? The question landed like a punch. What? Damien said. Elena. Nikolai's expression was unreadable. You think she manipulated you, used you, destroyed you for sport. You want revenge? I want the truth. The truth is complicated. Nikolai closed the laptop. But I can offer you something simpler. A choice. What choice? Walk away right now. I destroy these documents. Your mother is safe. Marcus's family is safe. You both go back to your little lives in Portland and Seattle, and we never speak again. Pause. Or what? Or I give you what you really want. Proof that Elena isn't who you think she is. That she's been lying to me too. That her real plan is bigger than either of us understood. Nikolai's eyes were ice. And then you help me destroy her before she destroys us both. Damien's mind reeled. You're turning on Elena? She's turning on me. Nikolai stood, walked to the laptop, pulled up files, emails, contracts, communications Damien hadn't seen in Marcus's envelope. 3 months ago, I discovered Elena has been building a separate network. Secret accounts. Shadow companies registered in my enemies' names. She's setting me up to take the fall for everything. Money laundering, fraud, conspiracy. He showed them an email from Elena to someone Damien didn't recognize. Nikolai has served his purpose. Once the international expansion is complete, we eliminate him and blame everything on his criminal network. Vale Global emerges clean. I take full control. Marcus leaned forward. She's planning to betray you. Has been for at least a year, probably longer. Nikolai's voice was cold. I built her empire, protected her, loved her, and she's been planning my destruction the same way she planned yours, Damien. Why tell us? Because I need witnesses, evidence, people willing to testify that Elena orchestrated everything. Nikolai locked eyes with Damien. You want revenge? Want to prove she's not the victim everyone thinks she is? Help me expose her, publicly, legally. We go to the FBI together with proof she's the real criminal. Damien felt dizzy. This doesn't make sense. If you loved her, love is irrelevant when someone tries to destroy you. Nikolai's expression was granite. Elena made a calculation. She decided I was expendable. So now she becomes expendable. Marcus looked at Damien. This could be another trap. Could be, Nikolai agreed. But what do you have to lose? You're already dead men walking. At least this way you take her down with you. Damien thought about Elena, about the woman who'd stood on that stage and reclaimed her empire with cold precision, about the emails Marcus had shown him, met the target, easy to manipulate, accelerate the timeline, about 10 years of his life that had been a performance, a lie, a calculated con. And now Nikolai, the man who'd threatened to destroy him, who'd monitored his every move, who'd held his mother's life over his head, was offering him the thing he'd wanted without admitting he wanted it. Revenge. What do you need from us? Damien asked slowly. Testimony. You both tell the FBI everything. How Elena recruited you, how she structured the fraud, how she manipulated both of us into doing her dirty work. Nikolai pulled out a phone. I've already scheduled a meeting, 2 hours from now, Manhattan field office. We walk in together and we bury her. She'll deny everything. She'll try, but I have evidence she can't explain away. And with your testimony, 2 victims willing to go on record, the FBI will have enough to freeze her assets, investigate Vale Global, and destroy everything she built. Nikolai smiled, thin and cruel. She wanted to play games. Let's show her what happens when you play against someone who doesn't lose. Damien looked at Marcus, saw his own conflict reflected back, the desperate need to believe this was real, that they finally had a move left to make. Our families, Marcus said. You guarantee their safety? I guarantee Elena will be too busy defending herself to threaten anyone. Nikolai extended his hand. So, deal? Damien stared at that hand, at the choice being offered. Walk away and live quietly with the knowledge he'd been manipulated by everyone. Or fight back one last time. Expose Elena for what she really was. Watch her empire collapse the same way his had. The vindictive part of him, the part that had spent 9 months drowning in humiliation, screamed yes. But there was something wrong here, something that didn't fit. Why would Elena betray you? Damien asked. If you built everything together, if you've been partners for over a decade, why would she suddenly decide to cut you out? Because she doesn't need me anymore. She has the empire, the reputation, the power. I'm just a liability now, the criminal connection that could expose her if anyone looked too closely. Nikolai's jaw clenched. Same reason she discarded you. People like Elena don't keep partners. They use them and throw them away. It made sense. Too much sense. And that's what bothered Damien. Elena had been patient, strategic. The woman who'd spent 10 years documenting his betrayals wouldn't suddenly make a clumsy move against Nikolai, wouldn't leave evidence lying around, wouldn't give him ammunition to destroy her, unless this was another performance, another manipulation. I need to think, Damien said. You have 2 minutes. Nikolai checked his watch. Flight to New York leaves in 90 minutes. You're either on it or you're not. Marcus grabbed Damien's arm, pulled him aside. What are you doing? Marcus hissed. This is our shot. Our only shot. Something's wrong. Of course something's wrong. Everything about this is wrong. But what choice do we have? Damien looked at the documents on the table, at Nikolai watching them with those cold gray eyes, at the laptop showing frozen frame of Elena laughing in her office, and realized he'd been in this exact position before, offered information he desperately wanted to believe, given a choice between surrender and revenge, presented with evidence that confirmed his worst suspicions about someone who'd destroyed him. This was the pattern. Nikolai had done this to him 9 months ago when he'd shown him fabricated financial records and threatened prosecution. Had done it when he'd offered him a way out that was really just a different cage. Was doing it again now. The documents Marcus showed me, Damien said slowly. Where did you get them? Marcus hesitated. Anonymous tip. Someone sent them to my office. When? 3 days ago. 3 days. Right before Marcus contacted Damien, right before this whole chain of events started. Nikolai sent them, Damien said. He wanted Marcus to show me. Wanted me to believe Elena manipulated me from the beginning so I'd be angry enough to help him destroy her. That's paranoid. Is it? Damien turned to Nikolai. The emails Marcus showed me. From Elena. Calling me a target. Saying I was easy to manipulate. You wrote those. Nikolai's expression didn't change. No. Prove it. Show me the original servers. Let me verify the metadata. I don't need to prove anything. You can believe me or not. Convenient. Damien's heart was hammering. Because if those emails are fake, if you fabricated them the same way you fabricated evidence against me months ago, then this whole thing is just you manipulating both of us into taking down Elena. Why would I do that?
Bosses?
Because she actually is planning to betray you. Not with fake emails you created, but for real. And instead of fighting her directly, you're using us as weapons, getting us to testify, to go on record, to destroy her credibility while you stay clean. Damien stepped closer. You're not offering us revenge. You're using us one last time. Silence. Marcus looked between them. Damien, he's lying about Elena, about everything. Damien's voice shook. The only question is whether Elena knows. Whether she's part of this or... The warehouse door exploded inward. Not literally, but the sound of it slamming open was loud enough to stop time. Elena walked in, alone. No guards, no Nikolai's security. Just her in a black coat and heels that clicked against concrete like gunshots. She looked at Nikolai first. Really? The warehouse where you killed Alexei Volkov? You couldn't choose somewhere less dramatically criminal? Then at Marcus. I'm sorry about the photos of your family. That was excessive. Then at Damien, and her expression, it wasn't cold, it was tired. Hello, Damien. His throat closed. Elena, I assume Nikolai's been telling you I'm the mastermind behind everything, that I manipulated you from the beginning, that I'm planning to betray him and take over the world. She moved closer. Let me guess, he showed you emails where I called you a target, bank transfers proving I was working for him before we met? How did you... Because he does this to everyone. Elena stopped 6 feet away, close enough to see the lines around her eyes, the exhaustion in her face. Creates evidence. Manufactures conspiracies, turns victims against each other while he stays untouchable. Nikolai smiled. She's good, isn't she? Watch how she flips the narrative. I'm not flipping anything. I'm telling the truth. Elena pulled out her own phone, pulled up documents. The emails Nikolai showed you? Fabricated. I can prove it. The bank transfers? Fake. The entire story about me working for him from the beginning? A lie designed to make Damien hate me enough to testify against me. She handed the phone to Damien. He looked at the screen, saw forensic analysis of the emails Marcus had shown him. Metadata proving they'd been created 3 weeks ago, not years ago. Digital fingerprints tracing back to servers Nikolai controlled. Jesus, Marcus whispered. Nikolai's been planning this for months, Elena continued. He knows the FBI is closing in, knows his network is about to be exposed, so he's setting me up to take the fall, making it look like I was the criminal mastermind while he was just my pawn. She looked at Nikolai. Except I've been documenting everything. Every real crime, every actual victim, every body you buried. Proof? Nikolai asked calmly. In the hands of the FBI, right now, while we're standing here. Elena's voice went cold. They're raiding your offices, freezing your accounts, arresting your people. I gave them everything. Nikolai's composure finally cracked, just for a second, a flash of rage that transformed his face into something inhuman. You stupid... I'm done being scared of you. Elena cut him off. Done letting you threaten everyone I care about. Done watching you destroy people and pretend you're protecting me. I built you. You used me, same as Damien used me, same as every man in my life has used me. Her voice shook. But I'm not a tool anymore. I'm not your asset or his trophy wife or anyone's fucking pawn. I'm the one walking out of here, and you're the one going to prison. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Nikolai looked at the warehouse door, back at Elena. Something shifted in his expression. Calculation, maybe. Acceptance. You won't testify, he said quietly. You're too implicated. You helped me build the network. You knew about the money laundering, the fraud, everything. If I go down, you go down with me. I know. Elena's voice was steady. That's why I already made a deal. Testimony in exchange for immunity. I tell them everything, names, dates, transactions, and I walk away clean. You're betraying everyone. I'm surviving. There's a difference. The sirens were close now, flashing lights visible through the warehouse windows. Nikolai moved, fast, faster than Damien expected for a man his age. He grabbed Marcus by the throat, pulled a knife from somewhere inside his jacket, pressed it against Marcus's carotid artery hard enough to draw blood. Nobody moves, or he dies. Elena went still. Nikolai, oh, you think I'm going to prison? You think I'm letting you destroy everything I built? His voice was ice. We walk out of here together. All of us. You tell the FBI this was a misunderstanding, that you panicked, that Damien and Marcus are lying. I can't do that. Then he dies. Then Damien dies. Then I disappear, and your mother has an accident, and everyone you care about suffers. The knife pressed deeper. Marcus made a choking sound. Your choice, Elena. Save yourself or save them. Damien's hands were shaking. His heart hammered against his ribs. The sirens were right outside now, doors slamming, voices shouting. Elena looked at Marcus bleeding against Nikolai's knife, at Damien frozen in fear, at the warehouse doors that would burst open in seconds, and made her choice. Okay, her voice cracked. Okay, let him go. I'll tell them it was a mistake, that I was wrong. Elena, no, Damien started. Shut up. She met his eyes. I'm sorry. For everything. For how I handled the divorce. For the public humiliation. For... Her voice broke. For not being strong enough to just leave, I'm sorry. Nikolai smiled. Smart girl, now. Elena pulled a gun from her coat pocket. Small. Black. Trembling in her hand like it was alive. Let him go, she said. You won't shoot me. Won't shoot. Maybe not. But they will. She nodded toward the doors. FBI's outside. SWAT's probably 30 seconds behind. You can kill Marcus, but you can't kill all of us before they breach. So let him go, and maybe you survive this. Nikolai's eyes narrowed, calculating odds, calculating exits. The doors exploded inward, real this time. FBI agents in tactical gear flooding through, rifles raised, voices screaming commands. Drop the weapon! On the ground now. Everything happened at once. Nikolai released Marcus and lunged for Elena. She fired. The shot went wide, hit the wall behind Nikolai's head. But it was enough to make him hesitate. Long enough for the FBI to tackle him. Long enough for agents to swarm the warehouse, securing weapons, shouting into radios, dragging Nikolai to the ground, while he screamed in Russian about lawyers and diplomatic immunity. Long enough for Elena to drop the gun and collapse against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on concrete, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Damien moved toward her without thinking. An agent blocked his path. Sir, stay where you are. I need... His voice cracked. I need to talk to her. You'll have plenty of time to talk. Right now, everyone's being detained for questioning. They separated them. Put Damien in the back of an FBI vehicle while they processed the scene. Through the window, he watched them lead Nikolai away in handcuffs. Watched them help Marcus, bleeding but alive, into an ambulance. Watched them talk to Elena, who sat wrapped in someone's jacket, answering questions with that same exhausted calm. She looked up once, met Damien's eyes through the window, mouthed 2 words. I'm sorry. Then she looked away, and Damien sat in that FBI vehicle, surrounded by agents and sirens and the wreckage of everyone's lies, and finally understood the complete truth. Elena hadn't manipulated him from the beginning, but she'd learned how. Learned from watching him take credit for her work, learned from Nikolai's ruthlessness, learned that the only way to survive in a world full of people trying to use you was to become someone they couldn't use anymore. She'd become exactly what she needed to be. And Damien had been collateral damage in a war he never knew he was fighting. The agent opened the door. Mr. Voss, we need you to come with us. We have questions about your relationship with Nikolai Orlov and Elena Vale. Am I under arrest? That depends on what you tell us. Damien climbed out of the vehicle, followed the agents toward a building where his entire life would be dissected again, where he'd have to explain how he'd been simultaneously villain and victim, how he'd destroyed his marriage and still been destroyed himself, how everyone involved had been both perpetrator and prey. Behind him, Elena was being led to a different vehicle, different building, different future. She didn't look back, and Damien realized this was it. The final confrontation. Not a dramatic showdown, not weapons and violence, just 2 people who destroyed each other walking in opposite directions toward whatever remained of their lives. The truth had been exposed. The empire had fallen. And nobody had won. They'd all just survived. Barely. The FBI interrogation room smelled like burnt coffee and institutional defeat. Damien sat across from two agents, one older, gray-haired, wearing the expression of someone who'd heard every lie ever told, and one younger, sharper, taking notes on a laptop that clicked with surgical precision. "Let's start from the beginning," the older agent said. His name was Foster. "How did you meet Elena Vale?" Damien told them everything. Not the sanitized version he'd told reporters or the defensive version he'd told himself for months. The actual truth. How he'd been nobody in Brooklyn. How Elena had funded the company's early days. How he'd slowly erased her contributions until they became invisible. How he'd cheated. How he'd announced his engagement to Celeste on the same night he'd publicly ended his marriage. How he'd deserved what Elena did to him. "But Nikolai Orlov," Agent Foster said. "When did he enter the picture?" "I don't know. Elena said she met him 7 years ago. But Marcus Chen showed me documents suggesting they'd been together longer, that she was working for him before we even met." Damien rubbed his face. "But those documents were fake. Nikolai created them to make me hate her, to turn me into a weapon he could use." "Why would he do that?" "Because Elena was going to testify against him. She had evidence of his criminal network, so he needed to discredit her first, make it look like she was the mastermind and he was just her tool." Damien met Foster's eyes. "But I don't know what's real anymore. Maybe Elena was manipulating both of us. Maybe Nikolai was telling the truth and she really did plan everything from the beginning. I don't know. I just know everyone lied." The younger agent looked up from her laptop. "Including you." "Yeah, including me." They questioned him for 6 hours. About Voss Dynamics' financial structure. About meetings with clients who might have been connected to Nikolai's network. About whether Damien had knowingly participated in money laundering. He hadn't. At least he didn't think he had. But the line between ignorance and complicity was thinner than he'd realized. He'd signed documents without reading them. Approved deals because Elena told him to. Trusted that the foundation beneath his empire was legitimate when he should have been asking questions. "Am I going to prison?" he asked finally. Agent Foster leaned back. "That depends on what Elena says. If she corroborates your story, that you were manipulated, that you didn't know about Orlov's operations, then probably not. You'll face civil penalties. Fines. Maybe some fraud charges related to how you presented yourself as sole founder, but nothing criminal. And if she doesn't corroborate, then you're looking at conspiracy charges. 5 to 10 years. Foster closed his folder. "But between you and me, I think she'll cover for you. She's already covering for Marcus Chen. Woman's testimony is putting away one of the most dangerous criminals in North America, and she's still trying to protect the people who hurt her." Something twisted in Damien's chest. "Can I see her?" "No." "I need to talk to her. I need to, but she doesn't want to see you." The younger agent's voice was flat. "She made that very clear. Said if we tried to arrange a meeting, she'd reconsider her cooperation." "But you're done, Mr. Voss." Foster stood. "Go home. Wait for your lawyer to call. Stay in Portland. And for the love of God, stop trying to contact Elena Vale. You've done enough damage." They released him 3 hours later. No charges filed. Not yet. Just a stern warning about staying available for future questioning and not leaving the state without permission. Marcus was waiting in the lobby, bandage on his neck, eyes hollow. "They let you go?" Damien asked. "Same deal as you. Testify about what we know. Stay quiet. Pray Elena's testimony is enough to bury Nikolai." Marcus pulled out his phone, showed Damien a text from his wife. "Come home. Girls are asking about you. We're scared." "Go," Damien said. "Be with your family." "What about you?" "I don't have a family anymore." The words came out flatter than he expected. "Just a mother who thinks I'm an idiot and an ex-wife who wants me to disappear." Marcus gripped his shoulder. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For dragging you into this. For believing Nikolai's lies. For... Don't." Damien pulled away. "We both made choices. We both have to live with them." Marcus left. Damien stood in the FBI building lobby, surrounded by people moving through their lives with purpose and direction, and felt more lost than he had the night Elena destroyed him on that stage. At least then, he'd had clarity. He'd been the villain. The story made sense. Now he was just a confused participant in everyone else's war. Neither hero nor villain, just collateral damage in a conflict that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with people more ruthless than he'd ever have the capacity to become. His phone buzzed. Email from Catherine, Elena's lawyer. Subject, final communication. Body. Mr. Voss, Elena asked me to relay a message. She will testify that you were unaware of Mr. Orlov's criminal activities, that you were a victim of manipulation, not a willing participant. This should be sufficient to avoid criminal prosecution. In exchange, she asks that you honor your previous agreement. Do not contact her. Do not speak about her publicly. Move on with your life. She has already moved on with hers. This is the last communication you will receive from anyone associated with Elena Vale or Vale Global. Do not respond to this email. That was it. No personal note. No acknowledgement of their history. Just legal precision wrapped around a final boundary. She was protecting him one last time, and then cutting him loose forever. Damien read the email 3 times, tried to feel grateful, felt hollow instead. He booked a flight back to Portland, sat in the airport bar drinking whiskey that tasted like nothing, watched CNN report breaking news about Nikolai Orlov's arrest, footage of him being led into federal court, face impassive, lawyers surrounding him like sharks. The anchor mentioned Elena. Key witness in the federal case against alleged crime boss Nikolai Orlov. Sources say Ms. Vale's testimony, combined with extensive documentation, could result in charges of money laundering, fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. If convicted, Orlov faces life in prison. They showed a photo of Elena, not recent, from a charity event 2 years ago. She looked young in the photo, vulnerable, nothing like the woman who'd walked into that warehouse with a gun shaking in her hand. Damien wondered which version was real, decided they probably both were. The flight to Portland was delayed. Mechanical issues. He sat at the gate for 3 hours watching people live their normal lives. Families traveling, businessmen typing on laptops, teenagers absorbed in phones. Everyone existing in a world where their biggest problems were delayed flights and overpriced airport food. He envied them. Finally boarded. Found his window seat. Stared at clouds that looked like dirty cotton and tried to figure out what came next. He still had his job at the marketing agency, assuming they'd take him back after disappearing for 3 days without explanation. Assuming news about his involvement in a federal investigation didn't make him unemployable again. He still had his apartment, for now, until the civil penalties and legal fees ate through what remained of his settlement. He still had his mother, though calling her meant explaining everything that had happened, and he wasn't ready for that conversation. He had survival, not much else, but survival was something. Portland greeted him with rain. Of course, the city seemed incapable of existing without water falling from the sky. He took a rideshare to his apartment. The driver recognized him, eyes widening in the rearview mirror, but didn't say anything. Just drove in uncomfortable silence while Damien watched familiar streets blur past. His apartment looked exactly as he'd left it. Dishes in the sink, bed unmade, laptop open to the tab where he'd been searching for Elena before Marcus's call had derailed everything. He closed the laptop. Didn't open it again for days. Work was awkward. His boss Sarah called him into her office the morning he returned. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah. You disappeared for 3 days, didn't call, didn't answer texts." She leaned forward. "Then I see news about Nikolai Orlov's arrest and your name mentioned as a witness. Want to tell me what's going on?" "It's complicated." "Damien," her voice softened. "I took a chance on you, against my better judgment, because I believed you were trying to rebuild, but I can't have this kind of chaos attached to my agency." "I know. I'm sorry. So, do I need to worry about FBI raids, reporters showing up, clients pulling contracts because they don't want to be associated with whatever you're involved in?" "No, it's over. I gave my statement. I'm not being charged with anything." Damien met her eyes. "But if you want me to quit, I understand." Sarah was quiet for a long time. "I don't want you to quit. I want you to be honest. If there's going to be more drama, I need to know." "There won't be. Promise?" "Yeah, I promise." She let him keep his job, but the tension lingered. Coworkers whispering when he walked past, Clients asking if he was the guy from the news. His professional reputation, what little he'd rebuilt, once again contaminated by his past. He thought about quitting anyway, moving somewhere nobody knew his name, starting over for the third time. But he was tired of running, tired of starting over, tired of being defined by the worst things he'd ever done. So he stayed, kept his head down, did his work, tried to become invisible in a way that felt almost peaceful instead of suffocating. Weeks passed. The news cycle moved on. Nikolai Orlov's trial was scheduled for 6 months out. Massive case, dozens of witnesses. Elena's name appeared occasionally in pre-trial filings, but she stayed out of the media spotlight. Vale Global continued operating under temporary management while the investigation proceeded. Damien stopped searching for updates, stopped checking to see if Elena had made any public statements, stopped torturing himself with information he couldn't change. 1 month after Seattle, he got a call from his mother. "You planning to tell me what happened?" she asked. "Or do I have to keep reading about it on the internet?" "It's complicated, Mom. Everything with you is complicated. Get simple. Tell me what happened." So he did. All of it. Elena, Nikolai. The manipulation and counter-manipulation. The warehouse, the FBI. The realization that everyone had been using everyone and nobody had clean hands. His mother listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You love her?" she finally asked. "I don't know. I thought I did. But maybe I just loved the idea of her. The version I created in my head. And the real her, the woman who destroyed you? She had reasons. That doesn't make it right." "No, but it doesn't make it wrong either." Damien exhaled. "We hurt each other, Mom. Both of us. Just in different ways. So what now? Now I live with it, make peace with it, stop waiting for some kind of resolution that's never coming." "That's very mature of you. Don't sound so surprised." His mother laughed, sad but genuine. "I'm proud of you, for what it's worth. You fucked up spectacularly, but you're trying to do better. That's more than most people manage." "Thanks, Mom. Come visit sometime. I'll make that brisket you like." "I will." He didn't, not yet. But knowing the invitation existed felt like something solid in a world made of quicksand. 2 months after Seattle, Nikolai Orlov's lawyer reached out. Damien almost didn't take the call. "Mr. Voss, I represent Nikolai Orlov. He'd like to speak with you." "No." "He says it's important, says there are things you deserve to know about Elena." "I don't care." "He's willing to pay for your time, $50,000 for one conversation." That got Damien's attention. "Why?" "Because you're one of the few people who might understand what he's going through, and because he wants you to know the truth before he goes to prison." Damien should have said no, should have hung up and blocked the number and continued moving forward with his quiet Portland life. But he was tired of not knowing, tired of living in the gray space between everyone's lies, tired of wondering which parts of his history were real and which were performance. "One conversation," he said, "in a public place, with witnesses." They met in a cafe near the Federal Detention Center where Nikolai was being held pending trial. He arrived in handcuffs, flanked by federal marshals, looking thinner than Damien remembered, older, the invincibility stripped away by orange jumpsuit and cheap soap. "Thank you for coming," Nikolai said. His accent was thicker now, stress or surrender or both. "You have 30 minutes, start talking." Nikolai ordered coffee he didn't drink, stared at it like it held answers. "Elena didn't manipulate you from the beginning. That part was true. She met you organically, fell in love with you before I ever knew you existed." "Then what?" "I recruited her 3 years into your marriage, saw she had talent, intelligence, ambition, offered her a way to protect what you were building while also helping me move money through legitimate channels." Nikolai met Damien's eyes. "She agreed because she loved you, because she wanted to make sure Voss Dynamics had protection from people like me. Ironic, right?" Damien's throat was tight. "She was protecting me?" "In the beginning, yes. But over time," Nikolai smiled, bitter. "Over time, she realized you didn't see her, didn't value her, and she started protecting herself instead." "When did she decide to destroy me?" "The night you told her about Celeste. That was the breaking point. She called me crying, said she was done, asked me to help her take back what was hers." Nikolai's eyes were distant. I helped because I loved her. And because I thought once you were gone, she'd finally see me. Really see me. Did she? For a while. Maybe. Nikolai's jaw clenched. But Elena doesn't love people. She loves survival. And when I became a liability, when the FBI started circling, she chose survival over me the same way she chose it over you. So we were both tools. We were both fools. Nikolai leaned back, thinking we could possess someone like Elena. She's not capable of being possessed, only borrowed, and eventually everyone gets returned. Why tell me this? Yeah, because you deserved to know you weren't uniquely stupid. I had more time with her, more resources, more power, and she still destroyed me. Nikolai smiled. Empty. There's comfort in that, right? Knowing it wasn't personal, that we were both just obstacles in her path. That's not comfort. That's nihilism. What's the difference? Nikolai stood. The marshals moved closer. Good luck, Damien. I hope you find whatever you're looking for, but my advice, stop looking for closure from Elena. She's already forgotten you. They led him away. Damien sat in the cafe for another hour, Nikolai's words echoing in his head. She's already forgotten you. Was that true? Or was it just what Nikolai needed to believe? That being destroyed by Elena was inevitable, impersonal, impossible to prevent. Damien didn't know. Wasn't sure it mattered. 3 months after Seattle, the trial began. Damien wasn't called to testify. His statement was submitted in writing, but he watched the news coverage obsessively, unable to help himself. Elena took the stand on day 12. The cameras weren't allowed inside the courtroom, but reporters described her testimony in breathless detail. How she'd walked through years of Nikolai's criminal operations with surgical precision. How she'd provided documents, recordings, testimony that left no room for reasonable doubt. How she'd been calm, professional, devastating. One reporter wrote, Elena Vale didn't just testify against Nikolai Orlov. She systematically dismantled him. Every defense his lawyers attempted, she had a counter. Every doubt they tried to plant, she eliminated with documentation. She was not a victim on that stand. She was an executioner. The jury convicted on all counts, 47 charges. Nikolai Orlov sentenced to life without parole. Elena didn't attend the sentencing, disappeared from public view before the verdict was even read. Vale Global released a statement. Ms. Vale has resigned as CEO effective immediately. She will be pursuing private interests. The company thanks her for her service and wishes her well. Then silence. No interviews. No social media. No trace. Elena Vale simply vanished, and Damien, watching from his Portland apartment, empty coffee mug in hand, another rainy afternoon bleeding into evening, finally understood what Nikolai had been trying to tell him. Elena didn't need anyone anymore. Not Damien. Not Nikolai. Not the empire she'd built, or the people who'd tried to possess her. She'd burned it all down and walked away, free. 4 months after Seattle, Damien's civil penalties came through. $200,000 in fines for misrepresentation of his role at Voss Dynamics. Another $50,000 in legal fees. His settlement money was gone. His savings depleted. He was back to living paycheck to paycheck, $45,000 a year, barely covering rent and debt. He picked up a second job, teaching business classes at a community college. 20 students who didn't care about brand strategy, just trying to get credentials for jobs that would pay them enough to survive. He was good at it, better than he expected, because he finally had something to teach that wasn't bullshit. How to fail. How to lose everything. How to keep breathing when the world decided you were worthless. One student asked, "Are you the guy from the news, the one whose wife destroyed him?" "Yeah." "Did you deserve it?" The class went silent, everyone waiting for his answer. "Yeah," Damien said finally. "I did, but deserving something and surviving it are different things. You can be guilty and still have to figure out how to live with the consequences. That's the hard part, not the punishment, the after." The student nodded, wrote something down. The class moved on. But Damien felt something shift. Not redemption, not forgiveness. Just acknowledgement that he'd crossed some invisible line between performing recovery and actually living it. 6 months after Seattle, he got an unexpected visitor. Sarah from the agency found him after his community college class. "There's someone here to see you." "Who?" "She didn't say, just asked if you'd meet her. Damien followed Sarah to the parking lot, found a woman leaning against a rental car. 30s? Professional. Not Elena, but carrying herself with similar careful control. Mr. Voss, I'm Jennifer Kim. I work for a nonprofit called Second Foundations. We help people rebuild after public scandals. I'm not interested in... Elena Val funded our organization 3 years ago, before anyone knew her name. Jennifer handed him a card. She wanted to create resources for people like you, like her. People who'd been publicly destroyed and were trying to figure out how to exist afterward. Damien stared at the card. Elena did this? She never told you? Elena never told me anything. Jennifer smiled, sad. She asked us to reach out after the trial ended, said you might be ready to hear it now. Pause. We offer therapy, career counseling, financial planning, community support, everything you need to actually rebuild instead of just surviving. Why would she do this? I don't know. She didn't explain. Jennifer opened her car door. But she left you something, asked me to give it to you if you agreed to meet. She handed him an envelope, plain white, his name written in handwriting he'd recognize anywhere. Take your time, Jennifer said. Call if you're interested. The resources are there if you want them. She left. Damien stood in the parking lot holding the envelope like it might explode. Cars passing, students walking to their next classes, the world continuing while he stood frozen. Finally, he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, Elena's precise script. Damien, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't want reconciliation. This isn't me asking for anything from you. This is me acknowledging that what I did, how I did it, wasn't entirely justified. You hurt me. I hurt you back, but I hurt you publicly, calculatedly, in ways designed to destroy you completely. That was revenge, not justice. I've spent the last 6 months trying to figure out who I am without anger, without Nikolai, without the Empire, without the need to prove I'm not weak. I don't have answers yet, but I'm trying. The organization Jennifer represents was created before I knew I'd need it myself, before I understood that destroying someone, even someone who deserves it, doesn't make you strong. It just makes you someone who knows how to destroy. Use the resources if you want them, ignore them if you don't. Either way, I hope you find peace. I hope you become someone you can recognize in the mirror. I hope the next 10 years are kinder than the last 10. I'm sorry for what I took from you. Not the company, you didn't deserve that, but your ability to believe you could be better. I took that when I made you the villain in everyone's story. That was cruel, and I regret it. This is goodbye. For real this time. Don't look for me. I'm not coming back. Damien read it 3 times. Felt tears burning behind his eyes he refused to let fall. She was apologizing, not for leaving, not for reclaiming what was hers. For the method, for the cruelty, for making his downfall public entertainment instead of private justice. And she was right to apologize. Because that part, the public destruction, the humiliation, the way she'd turned him into a cautionary tale, that had been revenge. Pure, calculated, designed to hurt him as much as he'd hurt her. They'd both been wrong, just in different ways. Damien folded the letter, put it in his pocket, pulled out Jennifer's card, made a choice. 1 year after Seattle, Damien stood in front of a room full of people who'd lost everything. Bankruptcies, divorces, scandals, public failures that had turned them into pariahs. My name is Damien Voss, he said, and I destroyed my life by refusing to share credit with the person who made me successful. He told them his story, not the sanitized version, not the defensive version, the true version, where he was both victim and villain, where he'd been manipulated and also earned the manipulation through his own arrogance, where everyone had been wrong and everyone had paid for it. The hard part isn't accepting you fucked up, he said. The hard part is living afterward, figuring out who you are when the old version of yourself is dead, building something new from the rubble without pretending the rubble doesn't exist. Someone asked, "Did you ever forgive yourself?" No, but I stopped waiting for permission to move forward. Someone else, "Do you still love her?" Damien paused, considered the question. I love the version of us that could have existed if we'd both been different people. But those people never existed. So no, I don't love her. I just understand her. The meeting ended. People approached him afterward, shared their stories, asked for advice, looked at him like he had answers when all he had was survival. But survival was something. And maybe that was enough. 2 years after Seattle, Damien got news through his lawyer. Nikolai Orlov died in prison. Heart attack. Quick. No foul play suspected. He felt nothing. No satisfaction. No regret. Just the distant acknowledgement that another chapter had closed. He wondered if Elena knew. Wondered if she felt anything. Wondered if she was somewhere warm, somewhere quiet, somewhere far from Manhattan and Empire and the people who'd tried to possess her. He hoped so. Not because he loved her, but because he understood now what Nikolai never could. Elena didn't belong to anyone, never had. And the only way she could be free was if everyone who tried to claim her finally let go. 3 years after Seattle, Damien published a book, Collateral Damage: What Happens After the Scandal. It was honest, brutal, took responsibility for his failures while also examining the systems that made those failures inevitable. Toxic masculinity, startup culture, the worship of genius that erased everyone who wasn't the face of the brand. The book sold moderately, not a bestseller, just a quiet success for people trying to rebuild their lives. One review said, Damien Voss doesn't ask for forgiveness. He just asks to be seen as human. And in that vulnerability, he offers something rare. Proof that people can change. Not dramatically, not completely, but enough. Elena never commented, never reached out, never acknowledged the book existed. But Damien found a donation to Second Foundations the week after publication. Anonymous. $50,000. Enough to fund another year of programming. He didn't need to ask who sent it. 4 years after Seattle, Damien met someone. Her name was Rachel. She taught literature at the community college. Quiet. Thoughtful. Nothing like Elena, and that was good. They took things slow. Dated for 8 months before she met his mother. Another 6 before they moved in together. You never talk about your ex-wife, Rachel said one night. Is that off limits? No, just ancient history. Do you think about her? Sometimes. Less now than before. Do you regret marrying her? Damien thought about it. Really thought. No. I regret how it ended, but I don't regret the beginning. She made me better than I was. I just wasn't smart enough to appreciate it until it was gone. What would you say to her if you could? Thank you, and I'm sorry, and I hope you're happy. He looked at Rachel. But mostly I'd say nothing, because some stories end and you have to let them. 5 years after Seattle, Vail Global was sold. Quiet transaction. New ownership. New leadership. The company rebranded under a different name with no mention of Elena or Damien or the scandal that had birthed it. Elena's name appeared once in the paperwork, listed as former founder. Nothing more, no interviews, no press releases. Just a footnote in a corporate filing, and then she was gone again. Damien heard rumors. She was in Europe. She was in Asia. She'd moved to a small town in Oregon and was teaching business ethics at a state university. She'd started another company under a different name. She'd quit business entirely and was running a charity. Nobody knew. Elena Vail had become a ghost story, the woman who outsmarted everyone and disappeared. The woman who won and then walked away from the victory. And Damien, standing in the backyard of the house he'd bought with Rachel, their daughter sleeping inside, rain falling gentle on Oregon soil, finally understood what Elena had known all along. Power wasn't about winning, it was about choosing when to walk away. 6 years after Seattle, Damien gave a lecture at a business school, some MBA program studying his case as an example of corporate culture gone wrong. The professor asked, "What would you have done differently?" "Everything. I'd have shared credit, valued my partner, built something sustainable instead of something designed to feed my ego." Pause. "But mostly I'd have been honest, with Elena, with myself, about who I was and what I actually contributed. Lies always catch up. The only question is how much damage they do before they explode." A student raised her hand. "Do you think Elena Vail was justified in how she destroyed you?" "I think Elena Vail did what she had to do to survive. Was it justified? I don't know, but I understand it, and I've stopped being angry about it." "Why?" "Because anger doesn't change the past. It just poisons the future." Damien looked at the faces staring at him. Young, ambitious, full of the same hunger that had destroyed him. You want advice? Learn this now. The people who make you successful deserve to be seen, not used, not erased. Seen. If you can't do that, you don't deserve success. The lecture ended. Students filed out. The professor shook his hand. That was good. Honest. I've had practice. One more question. The professor hesitated. Do you think Elena Vale ever thinks about you? Damien smiled. No, and that's okay. I'm not the story she's telling anymore. I'm just someone who was there when she learned she didn't need anyone. 7 years after Seattle, on a random Tuesday that felt like any other, Damien's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him. Hello? Silence. Then, hi. That voice. After 7 years. After everything. After becoming someone different, building a different life, learning to exist without answers. Elena. Hi, he said, throat tight. I'm calling to tell you I'm getting married. Not Nikolai. Someone you don't know, someone good, who sees me. Long pause. And I wanted you to hear it from me instead of reading about it. Okay. Are you angry? No, I'm happy for you. You mean that? Yeah, I do. Silence. Stretched between them like years, like miles. Like all the damage that couldn't be undone but had somehow become survivable. I read your book, Elena said finally. It was good. Honest. Yours? I haven't written one. Don't think I will. Pause. Some stories are better left alone. Maybe. I'm sorry for what I did, how I did it. I've said it before, but her voice cracked. I mean it. I was so angry I couldn't see past it, and by the time I could, the damage was done. I'm sorry, too, for taking credit, for not seeing you, for being too weak to share the spotlight. We were both young. We were both stupid. Elena laughed, sad but real, the first genuine sound he'd heard from her in almost a decade. Take care of yourself, Damien. You too. I won't call again. I know. The line went quiet. Neither of them hung up, just breathed in silence that felt like peace, like closure, like two people who destroyed each other finally acknowledging they'd both survived. Goodbye, Elena. Goodbye, Damien. She hung up. And Damien stood in his kitchen, phone still pressed to his ear, while his daughter called from the living room asking if he wanted to play. Yeah, he called back. Be right there. He put down the phone, walked toward the sound of his daughter's laughter, toward the life he'd built from the ruins of the one he'd destroyed. And for the first time in 7 years, he didn't look back. 8 years after Seattle, Damien Voss woke up in a house that felt like home. Rain tapped against windows. Rachel slept beside him. His daughter, 6 years old now, bright and wild and nothing like the man he used to be, would be awake soon, demanding pancakes and stories. He got up, made coffee, stood at the window watching Portland wake up beneath gray skies that no longer felt oppressive. Somewhere in the world, Elena Vale was probably doing the same thing, standing at a window, drinking coffee, building a life that had nothing to do with Manhattan or empires or the men who'd tried to possess her. They'd both survived. Both changed. Both learned that the only way forward was to stop looking back. And that was enough. Not redemption, not forgiveness, not some neat resolution where everyone learned their lesson and lived happily. Just two broken people who'd broken each other, learning to exist in the wreckage. Learning that survival was its own kind of victory. Learning that sometimes the only way to win was to stop keeping score. Damien heard his daughter's footsteps, turned away from the window, smiled at her messy hair and sleepy eyes, and the absolute certainty that this messy, imperfect, hard-won life was worth every painful step it took to get here. Morning, kiddo. Morning, Dad. Can we have pancakes? Yeah, we can have pancakes. And somewhere far away, in a city he'd never see again, Manhattan glowed beneath a sunrise that reached both coasts. Elena's empire still stood, rebranded, restructured, thriving under new leadership. But Elena herself had walked away, chosen peace over power, chosen being seen by someone who loved her over being worshipped by everyone who feared her. She'd won. They'd both won. Just not in the way anyone expected. Not with triumph or vindication or the satisfaction of watching enemies burn. With release. With understanding. With the quiet acknowledgement that they'd been at war with the wrong people all along. The real enemies weren't each other. They were the versions of themselves that had been too proud, too hurt, too desperate to admit they needed help. Those versions were dead now. Buried in Seattle warehouses and FBI interrogation rooms and divorce papers and 7 years of silence. What remained was simpler. Two people who'd learned the hardest lesson anyone ever learns. You don't win by destroying others. You win by surviving yourself. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, survival is enough. The rain stopped. The sun broke through clouds. And Damien Voss, former CEO, former husband, former villain in someone else's story, flipped pancakes for his daughter and felt something he hadn't felt in a decade. Content. Not happy. Not healed. Not redeemed. Just content. And that finally was enough.